I am invincible after awakening the Superman gene. Chapter 61. Secretary Lee, who walked out of the side room, also turned gloomy. It's just that he stood in the dense night, and his facial expression was not obvious. After walking a few steps, he threw the fresh and warm corpse on his shoulders to the people below. Just dig a hole and bury it. Secretary Lee clapped his hands and said calmly. The people below quickly nodded and said yes, then moved away quickly with the corpse. Seeing their figures gradually merge into the night, Secretary Lee's face became more and more gloomy. This feeling of pushing Anzi out with his own hands is not pleasant. Of course he doesn't care about Anzi's life or death, but this means that the power of the Lee family in Qingyang will be weakened by Tiandawei. But he had no choice but to make such a choice. Secretary Lee has clearly noticed that Li Mo no longer trusts him as much as before in recent days. This is not to say that he has revealed any flaws, but that Li Mo now believes that he doesn't believe anyone except his own blood. If he didn't push out this dark coin buried in the 6th room, then the risk of his own exposure would be great. The person who died just now must be the scapegoat. Secretary Lee didn't go back to the side room again. He took advantage of the night to walk in the secluded manner. His eyes kept changing, and he was thinking secretly in his heart. Overnight, Tiandawei immediately lost 2 precious A levels, and number 4 and number 5 are both dead. The moment he heard the news, he was extremely shocked in his heart. These are 2 A grades, not 2 Chinese cabbages. How can you say that if you don't have it, you will have it? But the reality in front of him is like this. What exactly is Li Mo's backer? Where did the Qingyang Li family come from, such a bunch of masters? Secretary Lee frowned. Their actions had been destroyed many times by this mysterious backhand. But his understanding is almost zero. Heaven and earth will only know that the opponent is very strong, and knows nothing else. What is the identity of the other party? How old? Which series of awakeners? It's not even clear whether he is a man or a woman. Secretary Lee's frown became tighter and tighter, and he couldn't help saying slowly in his heart, could it be that Qingyang Li's has been prepared for a long time? But how could they know our plan? Unless... He stopped suddenly, his pupils shrank sharply. Just now, an extremely absurd idea suddenly popped up in his heart. That is, unless there is an inner ghost in the Tiandawei. But no matter from which point of view, this is impossible. However, apart from this, he couldn't think of other possibilities for a while. Secretary Lee thought for a long time, then took out his mobile phone from his pocket, and he dialed the secret number again. After a brief beep, the phone was connected, and he said calmly. A few miscellaneous fish may have been mixed into the fish pond recently, so clean it up. The middle-aged man hung up the phone and his expression changed. There may be miscellaneous fish in the fish pond, so he immediately knew what number 3 meant. How is this possible? Why? The middle-aged man sighed slightly, pondered for a while, and then edited a text message on his mobile phone. Half an hour later, an underground tavern in the imperial capital. Chen Lingling was sitting on a pair of high-heeled sandals and an ultra-short skirt that covered her hips, revealing most of her white and tender skin. With her legs crossed and a glass of high-strength cocktail in her hand, she quietly listened to the middle-aged man's narration. After he finished speaking, Chen Lingling put down her wine glass, shook her head immediately and said, "This is absolutely impossible. As long as I'm here, there won't be any problems." As an extremely rare spiritual system awakener, she has absolute confidence to make such a judgment. If Tiandawei really has an inner ghost, it must be impossible to escape her eyes, unless that ghost is herself. However, this is obviously not possible. I have absolute trust in you, but number 3 means to screen again. The middle-aged man said slowly. Hearing this, Chen Lingling frowned, raised her neck slightly, thought carefully for a while, and finally nodded. The screening has to be done in secret. We have suffered a lot this time. If it is not necessary in the recent period, we should try to reduce meetings as much as possible. The middle-aged man said. Is there any problem with the identities of number 4 and no 5? Chen Lingling asked. Don't worry, I'll take care of it myself. The middle-aged man picked up the goblet and touched Chen Lingling, swallowed slowly, and said at the same time. I believe number 3's judgment. Our plan should have been leaked. If you don't find any problems in the follow-up screening, then there is a high probability that the other party has some unknown detection method. I think so too. Chen Lingling nodded in agreement. She thought it was just a coincidence last time, but now it seems obviously not the case. Coincidentally, it cannot happen twice in a row. How about the next action? Is it still going according to the original plan? Next, the middle-aged man shook his red wine glass and let out a long breath. Obviously, the huge and tragic loss of the 2A levels this time did not hit him lightly. He said slowly, "A 1,000-year-old family is a 1,000-year-old family after all, relying on us alone may be powerless. It seems that if you want to bring down an aristocratic family, you still need to rely on the power of the aristocratic family. The original plan remains unchanged. Number 9, let's see how you perform." Quote. Hearing this, Chen Lingling drank the wine in the glass. She took out 2 banknotes from her purse and put them on the bar, then stood up from the chair and walked towards the bar. Relax. Number 2. The next day, as soon as it was dawn, Chinmo opened his eyes. He got up and took a shower first, then made a simple breakfast with the vegetables he bought last night, packed up and went out. Facing the most beautiful morning sun of the day, and the incomprehensible and surprised looks of passers-by on the road, Chinmo ran for 2 hours in the morning. He got stuck and entered the office of the 7th group, and then started a day of fishing life. There were still only 4 ordinary people in the office, and Li Chengfeng and the others didn't even come, and went directly to the hospital. Chinmo was happy to be quiet and at ease. He sat at his workstation, sent a text message to Chu Tianzhao, and asked him to come out to have dinner with him at night, and then, he will go to the big health care later. In less than a minute, Chu Tianzhao sent him a message back and readily agreed. The corner of Chinmo's mouth curled up. Tonight, he mainly wanted to get some wool from Chu Tianzhao and ask some secret things. According to Chu Tianzhao, the two are friends. Since they are friends, of course it is not in vain. Just like that, time flies by. After lunch, the few of them did not continue to go back to work, but followed each other to the Imperial Hospital to visit Li Yuan. Emotionally and rationally, this is what should be done. Chinmo didn't refuse. After all, the lighting in the Imperial Hospital was very good, and he still remembered it fresh. It's a pity that the visit didn't take long, less than half an hour before they were driven out by Li Chengfeng and others with excuses. This made Su Yin so angry that she was in a bad mood in the afternoon, and she actually missed work. In order to comfort her, Chinmo followed suit. Ever since, the two of them just played outside for the whole afternoon openly. After about 5 o'clock, Chinmo was thinking about the health care at night, so he found an excuse to separate from Su Yin. Walking on the spacious street, his eyes focused on his eyes, and he quietly opened the Gene Awakening panel. Light energy points. 21, freely assignable. Today's temperature is not very high, but it still broke through 20 o'clock. I have to say that this must be due to his absenteeism in the afternoon. Chinmo thought about it for a while, and decided to mention the old 4 items of eyesight first, so he allocated 3 points to each of them. Afterwards, he added 3 points to hearing and intelligence, which were set yesterday. For the remaining 3 points, 2 points were lost for breathing, and 1 point was gained for recovery, which belonged to rain and dew. The warm current immediately began to swim through the body, fully strengthening him. Breathing. 67, skill exhalation freezes, hurricane strengthening. Breathing is strengthened again. This means that Chinmo's attack methods will be more comprehensive. In fact, in a sense, he can now be regarded as a veritable element awakener. As for the elements he controls, they are naturally ice elements and wind elements. After this strengthening, I wonder if it is possible to freeze people to death. Chinmo thought in his heart. When he killed the man in the tuxedo of the Tiandaway, he looked like he was frozen to death on the surface, but in fact he was not. That A-level died mainly because of his terrifying power. That punch cost most of his life. The follow-up was because he made a coffin for himself, and Chinmo froze the water and cut off his breathing. It is much easier to condense water into ice with a breath of air than to directly freeze people into ice cubes. Therefore, he could not directly freeze people to death before. It's a pity that Chinmo doesn't have any trash fish from the Tiandaway to try his hand, so he can only find something to try to see how much his skills have been strengthened. He was walking on the street now, and couldn't find a perfect test product for a while, so he could only stare at the thermos in his hand. As soon as he thought about it, Chinmo unscrewed the lid of the cup, only to see that there was still a small half of the water in it, which was still warm. He glanced around to make sure no one had noticed him, then took a slow breath. Call. Chinmo blew lightly on the cup, and the cold air was squeezed out from his lungs. A layer of frost quickly hung on the wall of the cup, and gradually thickened and solidified. After just a few seconds, the outer wall of the thermos cup completely condensed into ice cubes, about 3 millimeters thick. Not only the outer wall, but even the small half glass of water inside had frozen into ice. Whoa! Seeing such power, Chinmo couldn't help but widen his eyes. You know, he is controlling the power, and he didn't make a full shot, but the effect is already dozens of times stronger than before. This is of course due to the continuous improvement of the breathing attribute during this period, but it is also enough to see how big the increase in this strengthening is. However, before Chinmo was happy for 2 seconds, his expression changed. Yes, this thermos is probably going to be frozen. Chinmo twitched the corner of his mouth, but that was all he could do. Who made him too powerful? However, looking at this crystal clear ice layer, without any impurities at all, it looks like a work of art. The only problem is that the artwork doesn't come at the right time. After all, the imperial capital is now in midsummer. Who would go out for a walk with an ice sculpture when they have nothing to do? Even if it is to cool down the body, no one uses this method, right? Therefore, Chinmo on the street once again became the focus of the crowd, and many passers-by cast strange glances at him. He naturally noticed it, but there was nothing he could do. He could only touch his nose embarrassingly, and walked quickly towards the agreed place. The thermos can't be thrown away yet. Chinmo needs to see how long the ice lasts until it melts, so as to calculate the specific power. As for the other hurricane skill, he didn't try it at this time. There are too many people around here, and if a hurricane suddenly appears, it will easily cause riots. Just like that, about 5 minutes later, Chinmo appeared at the familiar barbecue stand with an ice sculpture. For the past month, he has come here to eat every 3 to 5 times, and the food he ordered each time is not cheap, so he can be regarded as a rich and regular customer. The owner of the barbecue stall had already remembered him, and the two occasionally chatted a few words. After he sat down, he still ordered several oysters and kidneys as usual. Then, not long after, a burly figure came from a distance, pulled the chair away with one hand, and sat down opposite Chinmo. Chu Tianzhao put the bracket in his hand on the side of the table, glanced suspiciously at the thermos bottle that had been frozen into ice cubes, and asked casually, "Do you still like playing with ice sculptures?" Hearing this, Chinmo's old face suddenly darkened. He raised his head to look at Chu Tianzhao, and then his face became stunned. "It's not important, the point is, how did you become such a ghost?" It was seen that Chu Tianzhao's head was wrapped with several circles of bandages. The same was true of his right upper arm. His leg also seemed to be injured, and he even had crutches on it. Compared with a few days ago, it can be said that there are two people. No matter how you look at it, it looks like. Chinmo gasped. His face became more and more stunned, and he said in a trembling voice, "You can't be beaten by someone, right?" As soon as these words came out, Chu Tianzhao immediately tensed his face, turned his head to one side, and said lightly, "No, I accidentally dropped it." "Did you fall?" Chinmo stroked his chin suspiciously. He looked Chu Tianzhao up and down, then shook his head and said, "I don't believe it. That's what I fell." Chu Tianzhao gave him a hard look, and raised his voice by 3 points. Okay. Seeing his stubborn appearance, Chinmo didn't continue to provoke him. Speaking of, he raised Erlang's legs, filled a glass of wine for Chu Tianzhao, pushed him to him, and asked at the same time, "Why are you always being beaten?" Hearing this, Chu Tianzhao's arm froze as soon as he picked up the wine glass. His thick eyebrows were huddled together, and his expression was a little sad and angry. "You don't slap people in the face when you beat them, and you don't expose your faults when you swear. This fellow has a vicious tongue." Snort. Chu Tianzhao snorted coldly, raised his neck and drank the wine in the glass without answering his question. However, the more he behaved like this, the more intense the fire of gossip in Chinmo's heart burned. You know, even though Chu Tianzhao is a bit stupid, his strength is there. Who can beat a B-rank awakener like this? Not to mention, he is the core disciple of the Chu family in Zhenbei, and who is the one who dared to fight against a 1,000-year-old family. And looking at Chu Tianzhao like this, he seems to have swallowed the loss of being dumb. This kind of shocking gossip is no less than the head of the security bureau sneaking in to do big health care. How can Qin Mo not be curious? As everyone knows, Chu Tianzhao is a dumb man who eats cactus and cannot tell what he is suffering. His injuries were of course caused by Li Shi of Qingyang. Although Li Mo didn't show up in person, it was very easy to deal with him. When Chu Tianzhao was first wrapped in a sack, he was still very angry, but after he learned about the rumors outside, he didn't dare to fart. This is especially true for the Chu family in Zhenbei. This matter is their own fault, so they didn't even ask for an explanation. Although Chu Tianzhao is stupid, he is not stupid. With just a little thought, he understood who leaked the news. However, when he was about to clean up Lin Shaoqi in a rage, that fellow slipped back to the border first. In desperation, Chu Tianzhao could only bear this matter alone. Looking at Qin Mo's appearance, he scolded Lin Shaoqi several hundred times again in his heart. At this moment, the roasted kidneys were brought to the table. Qin Mo casually picked up a bunch and bit off, then Fox asked. I said, you are already like this, can you still go to the big health care later? Chu Tianzhao. He picked up an oyster with his left hand, put it to his mouth and inhaled it in one gulp. With a straight face, he said coldly. Hee, I have no problem with the 10 daughters of Yeyu. I do not believe. Chu Tianzhao clenched his fists. Afterwards, the two ate and chatted like this. At 9 o'clock, Qin Mo took the ice-sculpted thermos and led Chu Tianzhao, who was limping, towards the place where they had an embarrassing meeting last time. Soon, two lonely men soaked in the steaming pool. Apart from the two of them, there is no one else in the pool. Qin Mo narrowed his eyes slightly, and suddenly asked, have you ever seen an S-level shot after staying at the border for so long? Certainly. Chu Tianzhao didn't think too much. He looked down at Kai Shui, and replied directly, I'm lucky to have seen the great Qin god of war. Oh, come on, I really want to know how strong the S-class is. Qin Mofu asked. Hearing this, Chu Tianzhao seemed to be lost in memory, his face couldn't help but become solemn. After a long time, he shook his head and said with emotion, I can't describe it, I can only say. S rank is like a god. Hearing this, Qin Mo frowned, and he thought of that comment again. The body of a demigod, the way is natural. A little more specific, for example, how big is the gap between S-class and A-class? Specifically, Chu Tianzhao pondered over the vocabulary, then he stretched out his hands and picked up a handful of water from the pool. He turned his head to look at Qin Mo, and said very seriously, if this is the power that A-level can control, then S-level is the whole pool. Qin Mo followed his gaze to look at Kai Shui, his expression gradually serious. It seems that the gap between the two is even bigger than he imagined. No wonder with such a large population base, the number of S grades is so rare. At least, there are very few S ranks on the bright side. A handful of water is compared to a pool of water, which doesn't seem intuitive enough. Qin Mo changed this to a different way of understanding. From 0 to 10, it is equivalent to going from F grade to a grade, and from 10 to 100, it is a to S grade. As the so-called quantitative change causes qualitative change, this is the case. Of course, this didn't matter to Qin Mo. If it is comparable to a god, then a Superman can truly interpret this sentence. If you blow up a planet with one punch, who cares what kind of god you are? There is only one thing Qin Mo has to do now, and that is to accumulate light energy points and improve his attributes in all aspects. Anyway, his growth rate is terrifyingly fast. Speaking of which, you should be promoted to A level soon, right? Chu Tianzhao suddenly asked after breaking the subject. Hearing this, Qin Mo was slightly taken aback, then nodded. Ah, probably. Seeing his posture, Chu Tianzhao's eyes suddenly showed envy. He also wants to be promoted to A level, but unfortunately he still has a long way to go. Afterwards, Chu Tianzhao continued to ask curiously, may I ask which department you are from? Ah, it should be considered as the mimic department. Should. Should this still be the case? Chu Tianzhao frowned, feeling puzzled in his heart, but he didn't ask further. For some, these things are already personal privacy issues. Okay, at 8 o'clock in the evening the day after tomorrow, the Songfang Club will hold a banquet, which is what I told you last time. Do you want to go? Songfang Club. Qin Mo quickly remembered the relevant information in his mind. He had heard a little about this clubhouse, and it was a very private and high-end clubhouse. There is a member reservation system, which is never open to the public. Qin Mo thought for a while, then shook his head, and refused. I won't go, I don't like excitement, and I'm afraid I won't get along with the children of those aristocratic families. As soon as these words came out, Chu Tianzhao's face became happy, and he hurriedly said, That's great, I can't get along with those people, but my family always asks me to go out and make friends, to improve my temper. You can go, when the time comes, we will sit together and just eat, so that I can have an explanation to my family. Quote. Qin Mo raised his brows, glanced at him lightly, and asked in surprise, Your family keeps you so strict? It can't be helped. Chu Tianzhao smiled wryly, shrugged and said, My father is the current head of the Chu family in Zhenbei. I can't disobey what he said as an S-level awakened person. Hiss, aren't you the next generation heir to the Duke? Qin Mo said in a shocked voice. He really didn't know that Chu Tianzhao's status was equal to Li Mo's. Chu Tianzhao did not deny it. He nodded, turned his face to the sky, and continued, My father always told me that strength is the most important thing in this world, and the composition of strength is complicated, including connections, power, information, etc. Many things cannot be solved simply by relying on big fists. The same is true for a millennium family who wants to continue for another 1,000 years, so he always asks me to win over the relationship now. Although I am not good at these things and I don't like them, this is the responsibility I must bear. Quote. Needless to say, if Li Yuan could have Chu Tianzhao's awareness, Li Mo might wake up happily in the middle of the night. Of course, everyone's ideas and choices are different. Life is your own, how to live should be up to you to decide. Who is right and who is wrong, who can know? Qin Mo shook his head, patted Chu Tianzhao's shoulder, and said, Your father is right, but not entirely right. It is true that fists cannot solve all problems, but that is a small part of a small part after all. If you still feel that you can't solve the rest with your fists, that means your fist is not big enough, hard enough, and you are not strong enough. Quote. When the words fell to the ground, Qin Mo stood up, stepped out of the pool, and stretched fiercely. Remember to pay the bill. He lazily left a word, and then left gracefully. Chu Tianzhao looked at his gradually disappearing back, thoughtful. Am I not strong enough? He murmured in a low voice, his eyes gradually became firm. Yes, I'm not strong enough. 2 flowers bloom, each representing a branch. While Qin Mo was enjoying health care, Li Mo was in a very bad mood. He was sitting in the study at this time, listening to Li Mo's report. His eyes slowly narrowed, and his eyes gradually became dangerous. After Li Mo finished speaking, the room suddenly fell into silence, and the atmosphere was extremely strange. After a long time, Li Mo just said slowly, One Yunjiang County and one Juyuan County, both of them are free people, and they have nothing to do with the 1,000-year-old family. Do you think this is credible? The information found should be correct. I think someone deliberately hid some of it. Li Mo said in a deep voice. Since we want to hide it, there must be something tricky, and we should focus on investigating what happened within the past 3 years. Li Mo said lightly. According to the report submitted by Li Mo, Dakin's official last record, the 2 A-level awakeners of Tiandaway were still 2 B-level awakeners 3 years ago, and they had no criminal record. But when he reappeared, he actually became a double A-level, and even became a core member of the Tiandaway. The speed of this advancement is too fast. So the past 3 years have naturally become the focus of investigation. Send a few young and reliable disciples to investigate in person in the 2 counties of Yunjiang and Juyuan. You are responsible for this matter yourself, and don't entrust it to others. Li Mo continued to order. Yes, I'll do it now. Go down. Then father rests earlier. Li Mo expressed concern, then walked out of the study, and closed the door of the study before leaving. Li Mo was the only one left in the room. He stretched out his hand and rubbed the center of his brows slowly, but his brows still couldn't be stretched, and he didn't know what he was muttering in his heart. After a few minutes, Li Mo suddenly opened his eyes, picked up his phone from the side, and sent a text message. The next day, as soon as Qin Mo woke up in the morning, he saw an unread message. He opened it and found that it was Li Mo who sent it in the middle of the night yesterday. The content of the text message was to ask him to have dinner with him after get off work tonight. It's so late at 3 o'clock. My brother seems to be in a bad mood recently. Qin Mo muttered something in a low voice, and then replied to Li Mo that he would see you at the old place in the afternoon. Afterwards, he made breakfast at home by himself and left the house. After running for more than 2 hours in the morning, I walked into the office of the 7th group on time at 9 o'clock. Li Yuan was discharged from the hospital today. Her injury was not serious this time, so she did not stay for a few days. Qin Mo saw her at around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and Li Yuan still looked the same, with a cold face, and said nothing, just nodded briefly, and entered the small office. He glanced at her neck, and at the same time turned on the perspective to look around quietly, and found that the pendant had disappeared. However, there was a golden anklet on Li Yuan's ankle, which didn't look like an ordinary accessory. Obviously, that was another elemental crystal, or a Holy Spirit relic. Qin Mo couldn't help but sigh with emotion about the wealth of the Li family in Qingyang. There was nothing to do in the afternoon, and it was still a happy fishing time. Soon it was 5 o'clock, and a warm current suddenly emerged. Light energy points. 21, freely assignable. Today's light energy points have been accumulated again. Qin Mo opened the Gene Awakening panel while getting off work and walking towards the outside of the Security Bureau building. He glanced at the 8 attributes, deliberated a little, and decided to add 2 points to each attribute. Then, for the remaining 5 points, Qin Mo lost 3 points to strength and 2 points to recovery. The recovery attribute has always been the lowest, but now that the super endurance has been awakened, it should be raised for a stronger battery life. The warm current began to quickly permeate the whole body. Qin Mo raised his brows suddenly. He was keenly aware that the area around the brain seemed to be a little hotter than before. Intelligence. 72, awakening skill, spiritual perception. Qin Mo was slightly taken aback, a little surprised. This newly awakened intelligence skill seems a bit unusual. The warm current continued to make some unknown changes to his brain, and it took about 5 minutes before it subsided like a tide. Qin Mo only felt that he was more sober than ever before. Everything around his body is extremely clear, and he seems to be viewing it from a special perspective of God. This is perception. The so-called spiritual perception may sound mysterious, but it is actually not that mysterious. The spirit, to put it bluntly, is just the mind. In short, Qin Mo now has an additional way of seeing the world. Not only with the naked eye, he can use his own mental power to perceive. There are strong and weak mental powers, but ordinary people are not bad, and the awakened people of the spiritual system will be much higher. In addition, someone like Qin Mo, whose intelligence is as high as 72, has awakened a super brain, and he will be much higher than ordinary people. I saw him close his eyes, turn off his hearing, release his spiritual perception, and walk on the road. If other people were like this, they would become blind and deaf, but Qin Mo was different. He turned when he should turn, and went down the steps when he should. He was not affected at all. For him now, his brain is his eyes. Of course, mental power is limited by intelligence, so the range Qin Mo can perceive now is not very far, only a radius of 15 meters. If you want to increase this range, as the old saying goes, you need to continuously enhance your intelligence attributes. The point level of the attribute itself is the root of whether it is strong or not. After a short experiment, Qin Mo opened his eyes again, the corners of his mouth slowly turned up, and whispered. Although the scope of spiritual perception is far from comparable to the holographic vision, the things you can see are more, deeper, and the feedback is faster, and it takes almost no time. Moreover, spiritual perception should not only have these uses, it seems that I still need to discover it slowly in the follow-up. Quote, the brain is the most mysterious place in the human body, containing countless secrets and enormous potential. Just look at the awakened people of the spiritual system and you will know that the source of their power is spiritual power. This series of awakeners has always been famous for being rare, strangely capable, mysterious and extraordinary. Since it is also spiritual power, the new skill spiritual perception may have different effects when facing spiritual awakeners. Chin Mo thinks so, but now there are no spiritual awakeners around, who knows what's going on. There is one at the Tiandaway, but the capital is so big, the probability of coincidence is even lower than buying a lottery ticket. But no matter how you say it, in the final analysis, Chin Mo's strength has been strengthened again. The sun quickly set on the hill, and just before the setting sun disappeared, he appeared in front of the barbecue stall that he often went to. Li Mo has already ordered the dishes and is waiting for him here. Brother has been waiting for a long time. Chin Mo opened the chair and sat down, picked up the beer and filled it up for him, and asked at the same time, "What's the matter, bro? Look at you, you're not in a good mood." "Nothing." Li Mo shook his head, raised his glass and drank it down. "Is it an annoying matter in the company?" Chin Mo asked tentatively, took a drink with him, and then said, "Brother, you have to calm down. It's okay to encounter problems, just find a way to solve the problem." "Why?" Li Mo sighed, frowned slightly, and said, "This matter is not that simple, it is not easy to solve." "Let's listen to it," Chin Mo said. "As you can imagine, it is indeed a company matter." Li Mo organized his words and said slowly, "I run a company with a long history, and the company looks very prosperous on the surface, but in fact it has long been riddled with holes. Especially recently, many old people in the company have dissented, even some high-level executives. I don't understand, the company treats them well, gives them a lot of resources, and pays them well. No matter how you look at it, they have no reason to betray the company, but who knows?" Li Mo seems to have opened up the chatterbox, but he only has such a gesture on Chin Mo's side. On weekdays, no matter whether he was in Qingyang Li's or the Security Bureau, he would not show this, even to his wife. Since he is the head of the family, he must fight against the huge Qingyang Li family. Listening to his confession, Chin Mo suppressed the smile on his face, considered his vocabulary, and said, "Since ancient times, people's hearts have been the most unpredictable. Where there are people, there must be entanglements of interests. I think the company run by my brother should not be too small, and he has a small family, so the conflicts of interests involved are much more complex. At this time, don't think too much. The more you think about it, the more chaotic you become. I still suggest that you take your time to sort out your thoughts slowly. No matter how difficult things are, they will eventually be resolved." Quote. At this point, Chin Mo paused, raised his legs, and continued, "If the problem cannot be solved, then just get rid of the person who raised the issue." Quote. Li Mo's expression changed, and he looked at Chin Mo in astonishment. "If you can't solve the problem, solve the person who raised the problem." Hiss. This is very reasonable. Li Mo's eyes changed, and various thoughts flashed in his heart. One word awakens the dreamer. Why did he have to think so much? If you find the Tiandaway and kill the Tiandaway, won't the matter be resolved? As for the inner ghost, instead of trying to find out by yourself, it is better to adopt a simpler, more direct, and more violent method. As the saying goes, when you should not be soft-hearted, you must act vigorously and resolutely. Li Mo squinted his eyes slightly, his eyes were sharp, and there was a faint danger in his eyes. He obviously already had calculations in his heart. Psychic awakeners are indeed extremely rare, but rare doesn't mean they don't exist. Thinking of this, Li Mo's gloom was swept away, and a smile appeared on his face again. "Ha ha ha, although you're a little perverted, you can still say a few useful words when you're serious." "Chin Mo, what do you mean, a little more charming?" Chin Mo's old face darkened, and he said quietly, "I've always been serious, okay." "You're talking about this right stem, right?" Li Mo said with a smile. "Brother, if you say that, then I can only say, both buddies are very upright." After finishing speaking, Chin Mo raised his eyebrows, leaned down suddenly, and asked in a low voice, "Do you want to relax tonight?" "I think, brother, you are like this now, it is most suitable for general health care." Li Mo. For a moment, he fell into silence, struggling in his heart. That kid Chu Tianzhao should have a long memory, right? After deliberating for a long time, Li Mo nodded incredulously. A night of romance and boundless joy. The time came quickly the next afternoon. "Sister Sue, I'm off work first, see you tomorrow." "See you tomorrow, handsome boy." Chin Mo greeted Su Yin with a smile, and then walked out of the Security Bureau building. He didn't go home as usual, but walked in the opposite direction. Tonight, Chin Mo is going to the Pine Wind Clubhouse. He didn't want to attend any celebration banquet, he had no interest in those silly things at all. Chin Mo's trip was mainly because of Chu Tianzhao's naive criticism. On the way to the clubhouse, he opened the Gene Awakening panel at the same time. Energy points. 19, freely assignable. Looking at the attributes, Chin Mo allocated 2 points to each attribute without thinking too much. For the remaining 3 points, he added 1 point to the speed and 2 points to the defense. In this way, these two properties are equal. Defense, 74, skill, Man of Steel level 2, elemental immunity enhancement. After this addition, the defense has been strengthened again. Man of Steel level 2 has grown into a Man of Steel level 3, and the defenses of the bones, internal organs, and body surface have all been more powerfully improved. Needless to say, elemental immunity will be enhanced together. In fact, Chin Mo's defense was already very strong before today. He could resist the attack of an A-level elemental awakener, and he was unscathed. That night, Chin Mo appeared in front of Li Yuan at extreme speed and blocked the water jet of the man in the tuxedo. This is the best proof. Now his defensive attribute has been enhanced again, and his life-saving ability will increase a lot. A faint smile appeared on Chin Mo's brows and eyes unconsciously. Looking at the various attributes on the awakening panel, he smiled even wider. Eyesight, 76. Listening, 69. Intelligence, 74. Breathing, 71. Strength, 83. Speed, 74. Recovery, 69. Defense, 74. In another half a month, all my attributes should be able to break through the 100 mark. I don't know if I can break the wrist with the S-level awakened at that time. Chin Mo thought to himself, his strongest thing now is strength, with a full 83 points, far ahead of other attributes. The second is the 76-point vision. Chin Mo has never reduced the improvement of his vision. It's just that since the last awakening, the vision has not moved for a long time. He suspects that this should be the same as the time of power. There will be a huge increase in qualitative change caused by quantitative change, so more light energy points are needed. The word of strength is superpower, so what is vision? Don't even think about it, it must be Chin Mo's long-awaited thermal vision. It seems that the distribution plan needs to be adjusted again tomorrow. Chin Mo murmured softly, his expression a little excited. Soon, 2 hours flew by. Songfeng Club is located at the edge of Lingyun District. Although the place is not very prosperous, it is extremely quiet. At some point, secluded often means mysterious and high-end. Chin Mo walked along a winding path, and then a large manor broke into his sight unreasonably. Inside the manor stands an ancient castle with a long history. At this time, the castle has been lit with bright yellow light. There is a pine forest in front of the castle, and there will always be a pleasant whirling sound when the breeze blows by. This is the origin of the name of the Songfeng Club. The waiter standing at the entrance of the club saw Chin Mo from a distance. He saw the cheap clothes Chin Mo was wearing, and he found that Chin Mo came on foot and did not drive. From these easy-to-find details, he already had some rough judgments about Chin Mo's identity in his heart. However, since this waiter can work in the Pine Wind Club, his professionalism is naturally needless to say. Hello, sir, please show your invitation card. The waiter bowed slightly, with a smile on his face, and asked very politely. Hearing this, Chin Mo stopped in his tracks. Instead of answering, he asked instead, has Chu Tianzhao arrived yet? Please go and tell him that his friend is looking for him. His surname is Chu and his first name is Tianzhao. When this surname and this name were combined, the waiter hardly thought about it, and the corresponding person appeared in his heart. On the surface, it seemed that Chin Mo couldn't be connected with the eldest son of the Chu family in Zhenbei, let alone claiming to be Chu Tianzhao's friend. But as the saying goes, people should not be judged by their appearance. Although the waiter was full of disbelief, he still smiled and asked Chin Mo to wait a while. Afterwards, the waiter turned around and walked quickly towards the castle. Chin Moyin stood at the door and waited, looking around boredly. One thing to say, this is the first time for him to come to such a high-end place. While he was waiting, an extremely expensive black sports car suddenly drove from a distance with the roar of the engine. The sports car stopped at the gate of the manor, and then the door opened, and a young man in his 20s stepped out of the car. Another waiter standing at the door stepped forward with a smile, but the man casually took out a golden invitation card and handed it over without even looking at it. His eyes were always on the sports car, to be precise, at the woman who got off the passenger seat. Chin Mo was also looking at the woman. The woman is about 1.7 meters tall, with delicate features, beautiful eyebrows and eyes, with light makeup on her face, wearing a white evening dress, and 2 transparent high-heeled shoes on her feet. The breasts are not as big as Sister Sus, and the legs are not as long as the team leader. Chin Mo secretly compared them in his heart, and then looked away. At this time, the waiter had already checked the invitation card, leaned over and smiled and said, "Please come in." "Let's go, Lingling," the young man said calmly. Hearing this, Chen Lingling walked up to him, stretched out her arm to hold his arm, and smiled sweetly. She didn't speak. The two entered the manor arm in arm like this, and walked towards the castle. They never paid attention to Chin Mo. Not long after Chen Lingling entered, Chu Tianzhao, who was notified by the waiter, strode out. Before the person arrives, the voice arrives first. "Ha ha, I knew you would come." Chu Tianzhao laughed loudly, with a trace of surprise hidden in his laughter. He walked up to Chin Mo, patted him on the shoulder, and then led him into the manor together. The waiters in the Songfang Club did not dare to stop him in the slightest. The banquet doesn't start until 8 o'clock, and there are still more than 40 minutes left. Let's go directly to the second floor. I'm too lazy to join them and talk nonsense. Okay, I'm not familiar with this place anyway. Chin Mo looked around the inside of the manor and nodded. Afterwards, the two did not enter the lobby on the first floor of the castle, and went directly to the second floor from the side stairs. The children of a small family standing at the entrance of the hall saw that Chu Tianzhao had brought a stranger in. They were curious about Chin Mo's identity, but they didn't go looking for it. With Chu Tianzhao's temperament, it would be a shame to go there. Especially in the past few days, this guy didn't know who beat him up. It was when they were upset, and they didn't want to be teased. The second floor of the castle was relatively quiet, and the two sat down on an open-air windowsill, bathed in the faint moonlight. The view here is wide, and you can see the pine forest outside, and you can also vaguely see the scene on the first floor. Chin Mo glanced at the children of the aristocratic families gathered in 2s and 3s below, then turned his head to look at Chu Tianzhao and asked, "Your injury healed so quickly. It's just some skin trauma. After using the medicine for a few days, nothing will happen." Chu Tianzhao waved his hand. Hearing this, Chin Mo gave him a thumbs up and praised. As expected of a high-level awakened person, he really resists beating. Chu Tianzhao. He twitched the corners of his mouth, his face twitching. Afterwards, the two chatted without saying a word to pass the time. Chin Mo is already prepared to eat more later. The food prepared for this kind of banquet is expensive. Anyway, I have come here, so I definitely can't come here in vain. While Chin Mo was chatting with Chu Tianzhao, in the lobby on the first floor of the castle, Chen Lingling was secretly observing the surrounding people. She followed the children of this aristocratic family and stayed in almost every small circle for a while. Seeing that it was almost time, she moved closer to the young man, smiled sweetly, and whispered, "I'm going to the bathroom to touch up my makeup. Come back quickly." The young man didn't become suspicious. Chen Lingling smiled apologetically at the others around her, then left the hall on high heels, and entered the bathroom under the guidance of the waiter. As soon as she entered, the smile on the corner of her mouth disappeared immediately, and she returned to her original expression. Seeing Chen Lingling walking quickly into the toilet cubicle, sitting on the toilet and locking the door behind her, she narrowed her eyes slightly, revealing a faint sneer. Immediately afterwards, she took a few deep breaths, held her breath, and concentrated on driving away the distracting thoughts in her heart, and concentrated her spirit with all her strength. Chen Lingling slowly closed her eyes. Her mind was dark. However, in the darkness at this time, small red dots suddenly appeared. These little red dots represent the awakened people in the castle. When all the awakened ones appeared in her mind, she frowned, and her mental power radiated instantly, covering the entire castle. All of a sudden, all the little red dots flickered, 3 points brighter than before, as if they had established some connection with her. At the same time, at the moment when Chen Lingling emitted spiritual power. Sitting on the second floor of the castle, Qin Mo's expression changed suddenly. Qin Mo suddenly had a strange feeling. This feeling is faint and subtle, as if walking halfway and suddenly bumping into a spider web. If it wasn't for Qin Mo's awakening of spiritual perception, then he would be unaware of it now. As the saying goes, when things go wrong, there must be demons. It is absolutely impossible for such a strange phenomenon to appear out of thin air. Qin Mo frowned slowly, and with a thought, he instantly opened the holographic vision, and the entire castle was included by him. Countless noisy sounds were analyzed and processed by the super brain, and a very clear three-dimensional stereoscopic view was quickly constructed in his mind. At the same time, Qin Mo released his spiritual perception with all his strength. Within 15 meters around, everything appeared in his mind, without missing any inconspicuous details. From these alone, everything is normal. However, besides these, Qin Mo had something else in his mind. It cannot be observed with the naked eye, and can only be seen by relying on his spiritual power. There is an extremely thin transparent silk thread on the back of his neck, which extends all the way into the castle. Because Qin Mo can only see a distance of 15 meters, he doesn't know where the other end of the silk thread leads. Spiritual perception is not as simple as it seems, and it turns out that you can perceive these special things. Qin Mo secretly thought in his heart that this sudden situation made him verify his previous guess. But, what is this silk thread? It cannot be seen by the naked eye, cannot be touched by the body, but can be perceived by the spirit. Qin Mo's super brain is running fast, and the first thing he thinks of is the awakened person of the spiritual system, which is the most likely. However, why did such a rare thing as a spiritual awakened person appear here? So far, Qin Mo only knows one spiritual department, and that is number 9 of the Tiandaway. Other than that. Qin Mo's heart trembled suddenly. Could it be that the Heaven and Earth Society has infiltrated the castle banquet and wants to use it to plan something? The super brain is running at high speed, integrating, summarizing, analyzing, and processing all kinds of information, and the outline of the matter gradually emerges in his mind. Qin Mo couldn't help frowning even more. He looked at Chu Tianzhao through his spiritual perception, and found that there was also a transparent silk thread on the back of his neck, extending in the same direction as himself. The same is true for the few people who happened to be standing within Qin Mo's coverage area in the lobby on the first floor of the ancient castle. Do you have any strange feelings? Qin Mo turned to Chu Tianzhao and asked. Hearing this, Chu Tianzhao was taken aback for a moment, subconsciously replied, strange. No. Apparently, he was unaware of the thread on the back of his neck. What's wrong? Chu Tianzhao looked puzzled. Qin Mo shook his head, and did not express his guess, but said. It's nothing, I'm going to the bathroom. Okay, I'm not familiar with this place, just ask the waiter. Chu Tianzhao said. Qin Mo nodded slightly, then got up and walked downstairs along the stairs. During this period, the holographic vision and spiritual perception have never been closed. Going to the bathroom was just an excuse for him. His real purpose was to follow the clues and find the person behind him according to the extension direction of the transparent silk thread. However, after a few steps, Qin Mo suddenly discovered that the other end of the silk thread was actually in the bathroom. Although, it is in the women's restroom. At this time, there were still 15 meters away from the other party. Qin Mo quietly opened the perspective, and several walls became unreal one after another. Immediately afterwards, Chen Lingling sitting on the toilet came into his eyes. It turned out to be her. Qin Mo's face showed a strange expression. He was still passing her by the gate of the manor, but he didn't expect to meet her again so soon. However, at the moment when he saw Chen Lingling, Qin Mo became more and more certain of his previous speculation. You know, the number 9 of the Tiandaway is a woman. When all kinds of coincidences come together, it is not a coincidence. In the blink of an eye, Qin Mo had already made a calculation in his heart. He slowly raised the corners of his mouth, and walked towards the bathroom. Seeing the little red dots flickering in the darkness, sometimes bright, sometimes dark, following a certain rhythm, Chen Lingling gradually relaxed. At this point, her task is half completed. This action of the Tiandaway is what number 2 said not long ago, to use the power of the family to bring down the family. And this banquet gave them an excellent opportunity. Those who can participate in this dinner are the talented young people among the children of the aristocratic family. If they can control them, they can influence the decision-making of the aristocratic family to a certain extent. Even if it can't be affected, if it grows slowly in the future, it will inevitably be the top of the family. Of course, control is not that simple, and it does not happen overnight. What Chen Lingling is doing now is just planting a spiritual imprint. This mission, so far, seems to be going well, and a faint smile can't help but appear on her face. However, at this moment, Chen Lingling suddenly stopped all movements, and immediately became vigilant. She found that a red dot had deviated from its original position and was constantly approaching her. The distance between the two was getting closer, and Chen Lingling's eyes became sharper, until she confirmed that the little red dot walked into the men's toilet next door, and she was relieved just now. Call. Chen Lingling opened her red lips slightly, and slowly exhaled a gust of fragrance. But I never thought about it. Just the next moment, a terrifying force suddenly hit her, carrying a strong wind, and slapped her hard on the partition without reason. Boom, boom, boom. Several boards were blown apart, and Chen Lingling's internal organs were severely injured in an instant. Her body seemed to be out of her control, and she fell heavily on the wall. Only then did she stop the castration. However, at this time, she had completely passed out. The blood gradually infiltrated the expensive white evening dress on her body, like a blooming bloody lotus. Beautiful and charming, Qin Mo shook off the water droplets on his hand, and walked out of the bathroom calmly. He didn't look back, as if what happened just now had nothing to do with him. When he returned to Chu Tianzhao's side, many children from aristocratic families in the lobby on the first floor had already heard the sound and walked into the bathroom quickly. Even though he used the mountain to beat the cow just now, it still caused a huge noise, directly shaking the entire castle. Soon, the young man who came with Chen Lingling let out an angry roar. Send it to the hospital. Hurry up and send him to the Imperial Capital Hospital. The mess in the bathroom shocked everyone. They had no idea what happened. They couldn't even believe that under the eyes of the children of the aristocratic family, besides so many awakened people, someone dared to openly commit murder. This is really incredible. Watching the expensive black sports car leaving Songfang Clubhouse at high speed, Chu Tianzhao's expression gradually became strange. He turned his head to look at Qin Mo beside him, and said suspiciously, I said, you couldn't have done this, could you? What does it have to do with me? Qin Mo spread his hands and said innocently, I did go to the restroom, but I don't know how to go into the women's restroom. There is some truth to this, but, is it really you? Believe it or not, Qin Mo rolled his eyes. Chu Tianzhao smiled mischievously, touched his nose, and then said with a smile, I think this banquet will not be able to be held. I never thought there would be such an unexpected joy. He took out the car key from his pocket, shook it, and continued, how is it? Do you want to go for a drive? Look at you, I can go anywhere anyway. Haha, let me show you my driving skills today. Then, accompanied by a loud roar of the engine, a supercar left the Songfang Clubhouse like an arrow flying off the string. Night, 9 o'clock. The Li family of Qingyang, the manor of the imperial capital. Li Mo looked at the text message he had just received on his phone and was extremely shocked. His throat rolled slowly, and he looked again carefully to confirm that it was not his own dazzle. The next moment, Li Mo stood up abruptly, walked out of the room quickly, and headed towards the study. Rarely, he didn't knock on the door, and just pushed the door open and entered. Before Li Mo could react, he said with a solemn face, in a deep voice. Father, we found number 9. That night, Li Mo stayed in the study for 2 minutes, then left the manor in a hurry. Without wasting any time, he made a phone call while driving, and quickly dispatched personnel from the Security Bureau to the Imperial Capital Hospital. Soon, the exits of the Imperial Hospital were surrounded by people from the Security Bureau, and all of Chen Lingling's check-in information was quickly investigated. With a cold face, Li Mo quickly walked towards a certain ward on the 3rd floor with a few reliable staff. After going upstairs and pushing open the door, I saw the young man from the aristocratic family standing inside, as well as Chen Lingling, who was still lying on the bed unconscious. Li Mo looked around, his eyes stayed on the hospital bed for a moment, and then he said, "Take away." Seeing this, the son of the aristocratic family was stunned. He knew Li Mo and knew Li Mo's identity. At this time, seeing the people from the security bureau start to walk towards the hospital bed, he hurriedly said, "Mr. Li, what are you doing?" However, Li Mo didn't pay attention to him at all, didn't even look at him, and just left a sentence. "Take them together." The people from the security bureau came and went quickly, and it took 10 minutes to get back and forth. Chen Lingling was taken into the black car that Li Mo was in, and he would definitely watch over it himself, and he was bound to ensure that there would be no accidents during this trip. Fortunately, everything went well, and the group quickly returned to the security bureau. Chen Lingling was not brought back to Li's manor in Qingyang. This is what Li Mo intended. At this time, on the second basement floor of the security bureau, Li Mo and his son were standing in front of a small cell. There was no one else here except the two of them and Chen Lingling. Looking at the unconscious Chen Lingling in the cell, Li Mo squinted his eyes and slowly ordered, "You must make sure she is alive, let a professional anesthetist come, and keep her unconscious first, without self-consciousness." "Yes." Li Mo nodded. "I have dispatched a spiritual awakener from Qingyang County, and I will interrogate her when she arrives." Li Mo went on to say that everything he ordered just now was to prevent Chen Lingling from committing suicide after waking up. For a spiritually awakened person, if he wanted to die, it was really too simple. The Qingyang Li family has suffered several losses in terms of spiritual seeds, and now they will not take it lightly. In addition, how is the investigation on her identity in the imperial capital? I have already sent people to investigate, and the results will be available soon. Li Mo replied immediately. Hearing this, Li Mo nodded slowly, and said calmly, "You follow up this matter yourself, hurry up, since you finally caught a big fish, you must dig out enough information from her mouth. Moreover, such a good bait should not be wasted. It would be a pity if a few more big fish were caught without using a long line." Quote. Li Mo squinted his eyes, his face was extremely flat, and his voice was extremely calm. However, Li Mo, who is very familiar with him, knows that there is danger hidden under this plainness. He asked, "Do you want to reveal the location?" "No need, the inner ghost will help us put the line." Li Mo shook his head, then turned and left without speaking. Although he is the director of the security bureau, in fact, he basically does not come to the security bureau on weekdays. If it wasn't for the Tiandaway tonight, Li Mo might still not be here. He was extremely shocked by number 9's sudden exposure. The text message Li Mo received on his mobile phone, as usual, was sent to him by breaking through the security bureau's firewall. Needless to say, the identity of this mysterious person is Qin Mo, and Li Mo knows it. Therefore, he did not judge the authenticity of the information at all, and quickly issued an arrest order. He has absolute trust in Qin Mo, and Qin Mo's previous performance has proved that he is fully qualified to receive such trust from an S level. Only, Li Mo couldn't figure out one thing. He didn't understand how Qin Mo did it. After so many days, the security bureau in Qingyang Li's tens of hundreds of people couldn't find any trace of Tiandaway, let alone track their core members. But now, number 9 was captured alive. The text message also clearly pointed out that number 9 is the spiritual awakener possessed by Tiandaway, which shocked Li Mo even more. This kid is really outrageous, he is a big fish. Walking on the dark street, Li Mo murmured softly. It can be said that Qin Mo gave Qingyang Li a huge gift tonight. Thinking of this, a smile appeared on Li Mo's face. Some people are happy, others are sad. Secretary Li is very worried right now. To be precise, he is extremely irritable right now. 9 was captured. He never thought that a spiritually awakened person could be caught so easily. In particular, his news tonight was not well informed. When he knew these things, Chen Lingling had already been locked up in the underground of the security bureau. Therefore, Secretary Li was not able to make some preparations in advance. However, number 9 is the only spiritual awakener they have. Her role is very important, and nothing will happen. How can Secretary Li not be upset? But things have come to this, what can be done? The current plan can only choose to take the next step. With a gloomy face, Secretary Lee dialed the secret number again. The phone was connected quickly, and he was the first to ask, "Do you know the matter?" "Well, I just found out. Since the fishing rod fell into the lake, let's find a way to get it out. I'm worried that there are nets in the lake. What if the salvage workers also get stuck?" A voice came from the other end of the phone. "So," Secretary Lee said slowly, "the speed of salvage must be fast. I think you know better than me how precious this fishing rod is. There is absolutely no room for loss." The voice fell, and there was a brief silence on the other end of the phone. After a long time, the middle-aged man said, "I understand. There are bound to be many people who cannot sleep tonight, but Chinmo is not among these people." After racing with Chu Tianzhao, he went straight home, washed up and lay down on the bed, sleeping very soundly. Anyway, he has already notified Li Mo of the news on the 9th. If Li Shi of Qingyang didn't grasp this opportunity, it's no wonder he is. Chinmo slept until after 6 o'clock the next morning. He was still the same, got up, had breakfast, and ran all the way to the security bureau. Stuck in the 7 groups of offices, the next step is the daily fishing time. Of course, Chinmo secretly let go of his hearing, and quietly followed the news of the Tiandaway. He soon learned from other people's conversations that Chuli had indeed gone on a mission last night, and it was said that important figures from the Tiandaway had been captured. This important person is obviously Chen Lingling. After confirming that number 9 was really arrested, Chinmo stopped paying attention. As for whether he can ask something next, it depends on Qingyang Li's own ability. In this way, the time soon reached 5 o'clock in the afternoon. With a surge of warmth in his body, Chinmo's heart gradually became agitated, and he quickly opened the Gene Awakening panel. Light energy points, 22, freely assignable. How to allocate today's light energy points, he had already determined as early as yesterday evening. Therefore, without the slightest hesitation, Chinmo directly added 6 points to his eyesight. The warm current quickly diffused around the eyes, and then subsided quickly. At this time, the vision has reached 82 points, but there is still no reaction. "Isn't that enough?" Chinmo whispered, and with a thought, he added 6 points to his eyesight. The warm current diffused rapidly again, but this time, was different from the past. Vision. 88, awakening skill, thermal vision. Heat vision. Finally awakened. Ever since Chinmo got the Gene Awakening panel, he has been longing for it. After all, this is a very powerful attack method of Superman, and it is also one of his iconic abilities. When it comes to Superman, the first thing people think of is his eyes. The so-called thermal vision looks like laser eyes, but it is not. What Superman's eyes emit is actually a high-temperature ray converted from the solar energy stored in the body, and the intensity and range are adjustable. When the temperature is the highest, it can even exceed the terrifying high temperature of the sun's inner core, and it can melt and evaporate almost all substances. Of course, the current Chinmo must not be able to do that. His vision attribute is only 88 points, and he still needs to continue to improve. This time the warm current lasted longer than before. Chinmo felt as if his eyeballs had been thrown into a steaming hot spring. The temperature of the hot spring was gradually rising, but he didn't feel anything strange, instead he felt more comfortable. Look at this. Fearing that it will not end for a while, Chinmo simply took advantage of this time to allocate the remaining light energy points. Today, he added 12 points to his eyesight, and there are still 10 points left. He looked at the various attributes and pondered in his heart. The attributes of eyesight and strength are too high. In order to ensure a balanced development, it seems that the rest of the attributes must be pulled first in the next few days. After thinking about it, Chinmo allocated 3 points to hearing, breathing, and recovery, and the last point was lost to speed. In this way, all 8 of his attributes broke through to 70 points or higher. After the assignment was over, Chinmo cleared the table in front of him and prepared to leave work. He walked out of the security bureau building alone, found a small noodle shop on the side of the road and turned in. The warm current around the eyes will not affect Chinmo's sight. He is in a good mood now and his appetite has been whetted. He ordered 2 large bowls of ramen and added an extra fried egg. By the time we finished eating, half an hour had passed. Chinmo walked out of the noodle shop contentedly, looked up at the setting sun, and slowly raised the corners of his mouth, revealing a faint smile. At the same time, his pupils changed silently, and a small red dot suddenly appeared in the center. The little red spot gradually spread, slowly occupying his entire eyeball, and then slowly disappeared, returning to normal. The smile on the corner of Chin Mo's mouth became more and more intense. He put his hands behind his head and walked towards Guanghong Street. Not long after, he reappeared in the unfinished construction building. With a light jump, Chin Mo jumped up to the top floor with ease. Since he awakened the biological force field, these things are not too easy for him. At this time, the sky was already dark. Chin Mo was bathed in the night, with his hands behind his back, looking down at the reinforced concrete under his feet. His eyes became red again, and a rich red light gradually filled his pupils. Then, with a thought in Chin Mo's mind, 2 high-temperature rays shot out from his eyes. Chi chi chi. The terrifying high temperature melted the cement, and at the same time melted the steel bars interspersed inside, as if cutting tofu with a knife, effortlessly. Chin Mo's eyes moved slightly, and the high temperature rays also drew a small circle on the ground. At the moment when the end-to-end was connected, a pothole the size of a human head appeared in front of my eyes. Boom. This is the sound of cut reinforced concrete falling on the first floor. That's right, it's the first floor. Chin Mo walked to the entrance of the cave, put away his thermal vision, and looked away. I saw a small pit appeared on every floor of this building, and traces of melting could be faintly seen on the edge of the hole. Just how powerful thermal vision is, it is enough to see the leopard from this tube. Chin Mo just experimented a little bit, but he didn't expect to penetrate the 7th floor directly. Moreover, this is not his full strength. I don't know if the defense of an A-level awakener can withstand my thermal vision. Chin Mo whispered softly, with a smile on his brows and eyes. He was very satisfied with the effect of thermal vision. Then, he jumped lightly again and disappeared from the roof. After a few seconds, Chin Mo returned home. He tidied up the room every day, then went into the bathroom, turned on the shower, and he wanted to take a cold shower. Clatter. The water sprayed on Chin Mo's muscular body. He raised his hand to get some shower gel, but the mobile phone that he had never thought to put aside suddenly rang. Chin Mo walked over and took a look, his eyes immediately became strange. The number displayed on the screen belonged to Li Yuan. It's so late, why is the team leader calling at this time? Chin Mo was puzzled. He picked up a towel and wiped his hands clean, then picked up the phone and turned on the speakerphone, and said hello first. Hey, team leader, good evening. Good evening, do you have any plans for tonight? Li Yuan asked straight to the point. No, what's the matter, leader, what's the matter? Chin Mo became more and more puzzled. Well, there are some things, let's talk when we meet. Li Yuan's faint voice sounded from the other end of the phone. Before Chin Mo could reply, she continued, I'm at your door right now. Chin Mo. Everyone is at the door. Chin Mo was slightly taken aback. When the perspective was opened, several walls became unreal, and Li Yuan's car came into his sight. Hey, really to the door? That's all right, team leader, wait for me, I'm taking a shower, I'll get out right away. Chin Mo replied. Okay. Li Yuan was straightforward as always, and she was the first to hang up the phone. 2 minutes later, Chin Mo had already sat in the car, still in the familiar co-pilot position. After he got into the car, Li Yuan started the engine without saying a word, and the sports car drove out of Guanghong Street at high speed. Only then did she say, come with me to see the house. Oh, it turned out to be house inspections. Chin Mo suddenly realized that Li Yuan really needs to change to a new house. After all, the land she moved into just a few days ago has become a pile of ruins. Where does someone inspect the house at night? And why do you ask him for such a thing? Shouldn't you be looking for an intermediary? Seemingly aware of the doubts in Chin Mo's heart, Li Yuan looked at Lu and explained. I need to work during the day and I don't have the time. Okay, Chin Mo nodded. It's still the old rule, I'll treat you to dinner. Li Yuan said. She seemed to be used to this. Chin Mo didn't refuse. He could get a whore meal for nothing by showing people a house, this kind of good thing that fell from the sky. Whoever doesn't do it is a fool. Where is the team leader going to rent this time? Is it Baiyun district? Chin Mo asked. Hearing this, Li Yuan turned his head slightly and glanced at him with a puzzled expression. Why rent a house? Can't you just buy it? Chin Mo. There is nothing wrong with what Li Yuan said. That's right, it's a little too aggressive, and it sounds a little bit inhumane. Of course, Chin Mo twitched the corner of his mouth. While the two were talking, the car stopped slowly in front of a sidewalk, waiting for the countdown of the red light. Ding dong. A crisp text message notification sounded suddenly. Li Yuan casually picked it up and glanced at it, then his face changed suddenly. She frowned instantly, with a serious look on her face, and quickly scanned the content of the text message. Immediately afterwards, Li Yuan turned his head to look at Chin Mo, and quickly said, I can't go to see the house tonight, there is an emergency operation in the bureau, you should get off here. Urgent action. Chin Mo frowned, and an association immediately appeared in his heart. Without any sloppiness, he directly opened the door and stepped out of the car. Sorry, Li Yuan apologized to him. Since it's an emergency operation, the team leader doesn't need to worry about me. Go quickly and be careful on the road. Chin Mo replied. Li Yuan nodded, then grasped the steering wheel tightly. She looked ahead and slammed on the accelerator. The roar of the engine sounded, and the tires rubbed violently against the ground in an instant. The sports car she was driving flew out, and drove quickly towards the direction of the security bureau. At this time, the intersection is still a red light. But it was obvious that Li Yuan could no longer care about these things. When the order for emergency action was issued, there was only one thing she needed to do, to appear at the action site as quickly as possible. Other than that, she doesn't need to take care of anything, and there will naturally be someone from the security bureau to deal with it afterwards. Chin Mo stood at the intersection, watching the car gradually disappear from his sight. At the same time, his hearing has been released, and it is gradually spreading in all directions, soon covering a range of 100 miles. Naturally, the security bureau was also included, and complex voices quickly entered his mind. This voice. With a thought in Chin Mo's mind, the super brain quickly recalled his memories for comparative analysis. The voice he heard now gradually overlapped with the voice he heard when he first heard the conspiracy of the Heaven and Earth Society. In the restaurant at that time, besides the middle-aged man and Chen Lingling, there was another person who once said a word. The person who was just arrested yesterday is going to rob the prison today. It seems, this number 9 is very important to the Tiandaway. Chin Mo frowned slightly, thinking deeply. At the same time, he opened his legs and walked slowly towards a dark corner. After a few seconds, he entered the corner, and his figure was hidden in the shadows, as if the two were about to merge into one. Then, the next moment, Chin Mo suddenly disappeared. He had activated his biological force field, and was heading towards the security bureau at a limit speed 8 times the speed of sound. 15 miles. The distance from the intersection to the security bureau is only 15 miles. Li Yuan has already increased her speed to 120 per hour, which is the limit she can drive in the Imperial City. Fortunately, it is not the evening rush hour after get off work, otherwise the speed would be even slower. But even so, it would take her at least 4 minutes to reach the security bureau. However, for Chin Mo, as long as less than 3 seconds. Tick, tick, tick. Chin Mo, who was moving at high speed, suddenly stopped, and not far away was the familiar security bureau building. With a thought in his mind, the holographic vision unfolded instantly, and the super brain started to operate, analyzing and processing the information coming from all directions. Within the scope of the horizon, there are a total of 38 awakened people. Among them, there are a total of 12 high-level awakened people, 8 on the side of the security bureau, and 4 on the side of the Tiandaway. From the perspective of the number of high-level combat power alone, the security bureau seems to have an absolute advantage, but it is not the case. Because there is only one A-level in the security bureau, but there are 2 in the Tiandaway. A-level, one person can destroy a city, they have a terrifying lethality, and the gap between awakened people of other levels cannot be made up by numbers. Chin Mo was very surprised now. He really didn't expect that 2 A-levels had just died on the Tiandaway side, and they sent 2 more backhands. How powerful is this? No wonder you dare to call Tiandaway. Who is behind this organization secretly supporting it? Chin Mo frowned slightly, thinking carefully in his heart. He is not in a hurry. Judging from the current situation, the security bureau can still hold on for a while. Chin Mo glanced at Li Mo's formation, and immediately knew that they had been on guard for a long time, and they were obviously waiting on the sidelines. It's a pity, I'm afraid Li Mo didn't expect that the iceberg hidden under the water in the world would be so huge. What he was waiting for was not a rabbit, but a vicious tiger that ate people without spitting out bones. At this time, the 15 awakened people dispatched by the Tiandaway, led by one of the A-levels, were violently attacking the building. Li Mo led people to guard the multiple entrances of the building. He stood behind the door with a calm expression, his fingers kept dancing, and several tentacles split out from the darkness, attacking the awakened people outside. How long will it take? Li Mo asked suddenly. Hearing this, the lean man who had been standing beside him adjusted his glasses on the bridge of his nose. He looked at the small computer in his arms and said meticulously, "Just wait another 3 minutes, and our encirclement will be completed." 3 minutes. Li Mo squinted his eyes, with a sneer on the corner of his mouth, and murmured to himself, "Father is right, he really caught a big fish." "How's the situation in the basement cell?" he continued to ask. The lean man quickly tapped the keyboard with one hand, calling up the monitoring of the underground surveillance, and then said, "Nothing happened." "Very good." A smile could not help but appear on Li Mo's face. During this period of time, they have been led by the nose by the Tiandaway, and now they are finally going to turn around and attack the Tiandaway. This time, it must be uprooted. Li Mo's eyes were extremely determined. However, before he could maintain his firmness for a second, there was a loud bang. Boom. The building is shaking, the earth is shaking. Li Mo was unstable and staggered on the spot. He turned his head to look at the location where the loud noise came from, and said in amazement, "What happened to the side door of the stairs?" Recalling monitoring, the thin man acted quickly, and he said immediately, "The surveillance at the side door of the stairs has been destroyed, so we can't check it. Can't view it." Li Mo's face turned ugly. Time goes back half a minute. When Li Mo was fighting with the Tiandaway people, another A-level had quietly walked around behind the security bureau. Obviously, the people in front were fainting, and the purpose was to attract their attention and firepower. The person Tiandaway really wanted to rob was actually this young man with yellow hair. Huang Maohui was standing under the wall of the building, holding a map in his hand, making the final confirmation of where Chen Lingling was being held. His pupils are an eerie yellow, which seems to allow him to see at night, unaffected by the darkness. After writing it down, Huang Mao tore the map casually and threw it on the ground. He clapped his hands, turned and walked towards the stairs, ready to move. However, the moment he turned around, a faint voice suddenly sounded. "It's not a good habit to litter everywhere." As soon as these words came out, Huang Mao's body froze slightly, and he froze in place. His hair stood on end, and his vigilance was raised to the highest level in an instant, before he turned around slowly. In the open space 5 meters away, a figure gradually came into view. It was none other than Chin Mo. The moment he saw Chin Mo, Huang Mao's pupils shrank slightly, his body bent slightly, and his limbs began to change. He didn't sense any danger from Chin Mo's body, but he was more alert now than before. 5 meters, such a short distance, but he didn't notice it. He didn't even know when Chin Mo appeared, but this abnormality was enough to prove how dangerous this person was. "Go, pick up the trash," Chin Mo said lightly with a smile on his face. He is quite relaxed now. After all, it has been verified not long ago that A-level awakened people are not a threat to him. However, after Chin Mo said this, Huang Mao still stood where he was, unmoved at all. Ho, ho ho. He slowly grinned the corners of his mouth, his teeth gradually became longer and sharper, and the smelly saliva flowed down the gap between his teeth to the ground. Huang Mao still exerted his genetic power with all his strength. In just a few seconds, he transformed into a huge lizard about 10 feet tall. A thick tail is constantly swinging between the legs, and the scales shining coldly all over the body have quite good defensive power. He is an A-level mimic awakener. As the saying goes, the strong are the first to act, and the second to suffer. The yellow-haired lizard flicked its tail at Chin Mo without the slightest hesitation. The thick tail carried terrifying power, and at an incomparable speed, it whipped up a fierce wind and aimed at him to attack him fiercely. As soon as you make a shot, you will do your best. However, in Qin Mo's eyes, this speed is still too slow, and the power is not strong enough. He just stood there and raised his right hand lightly. Boom! There was a loud noise, the terrifying force shook the ground, and the building of the security bureau was shaking, but in Qin Mo's hands, there was no slightest wave. The yellow-haired lizard was stunned, his bright yellow pupils kept zooming back and forth. It was hard to believe that the scene he saw was real. How did you catch it like that? Is this guy AS rank? At this moment, he was extremely shocked in his heart, but before he could make the next reaction, he suddenly saw. In the center of Qin Mo's eyes, two small red dots suddenly appeared. Immediately afterwards, the red dot gradually expanded at a terrifying speed, filling Qin Mo's eyes in an instant. The next moment, two high-temperature rays shot out. Laugh! The dark night suddenly shines. Two eye-catching crimson lights became the absolute protagonists tonight. The extremely hard lizard scale armor, which can resist missiles, is like a thin piece of paper in front of the high-temperature rays. The defense of the A-level awakened person did not play its due role at all, and it became fragmented in an instant. The rays were aimed directly at the yellow-haired lizard's head. After the terrifying high temperature penetrated his skull, it actually melted his brain directly. An A-level person died just like that. He didn't even know what happened, he didn't even think about his last words in his heart, and before the thought flashed through his mind, he lost consciousness. Chi. The high-temperature ray traveled down the lizard's body until it touched the ground before it was retracted by Qin Mo. The crimson light gradually faded and hid in the depths of his pupils, and the restless solar energy returned to silence. Boom! A loud noise suddenly sounded. The lizard's body was perfectly cut from the middle, split into two, and fell to the sides respectively, hitting the ground heavily, creating a cloud of smoke. There is no blood, and no bloody scenes where the internal organs are spilled all over the place. Because the powerful high temperature seals the wound and solidifies the section while cutting. Qin Mo let go of his right hand, dropped his tail, watched the scene in front of him quietly, and let out a breath slowly. To be honest, he was shocked by himself. Just now, Qin Mo shot with all his strength, because he had no idea before he shot. Who knows what kind of power the newly awakened thermal vision will have. Now it seems that there is no need to say more. The huge corpse in front of him is more sonorous and powerful than any gorgeous rhetoric. Boom! This loud noise startled everyone present. In front of the security bureau building, a short man covered in rocks suddenly stopped what he was doing, and turned his head suddenly to look in the direction of the side door of the stairs. The stalagmite's pupils shrank sharply, his face changed suddenly, and a stormy sea suddenly set off in his heart. Huang Xian is dead. How can this be? He was shocked. However, now is not the time to be in a daze. I saw him stretch out his hands, spread his 5 fingers, and then clench them tightly. The ground around him suddenly trembled, and the soil and rocks rose up, following the direction of his waving arms, and gathered in front of him, forming a thick high wall. The earth wall was layered upon layer, and thorns condensed on it, aiming at the sky and bursting out. Every thorn is enough to easily take away a B-level awakened person. At this moment, a gust of wind suddenly appeared in the night sky, and a huge black shadow flashed past. When the wings vibrated, all the earth and rocks were shattered into fine powder. This is the A-level that Li Shi from Qingyang played tonight. He is an awakened person of the mimic system, and what he simulates is King of the Sky, Eagle. The sharp eagle eyes are completely unrestricted in the dark night, and can keenly capture any enemy. He folded his body deftly, swooped down towards the ground, and opened his claws to fight back. The powerful eagle claws were enough to tear apart missiles, and the earth wall condensed by the stalagmites shattered into dozens of pieces under his claws. However, who would have thought that there was no one behind the wall? Li Yi was a little stunned. He could barely stop the momentum of the impact, and Hawkeye quickly scanned around. Afterwards, he fell towards the ground, shrinking in size on the way down, and turned back into a human form, with no strands of hair on his body. Li Yi looked down, and saw that there was a big hole buried under the broken clods, and he didn't know where it led. I didn't expect the Tiandaway to run away directly. Shikai's attack was just a cover-up. The real purpose of the stalagmite was to take the other members of the Tiandaway away together. Just kidding, Huang Xian's body is probably going to be cold, and if they continue to stay here, isn't that just a blatant death? Therefore, the stalagmite went very decisively. As an Earth Element Awakener, if he wanted to leave, it would be difficult for the Security Bureau to keep him. And he didn't have to worry about being caught up. No one knew in which direction he was fleeing. While he was digging a hole, he would also block the back. At this time, the Security Bureau was 10 miles east, in a closed billiard hall. The stone cracked, and a pothole suddenly appeared out of thin air. Immediately afterwards, the stalagmite jumped out, and the rest climbed up after him. After everyone came out, the stalagmite stretched out its hand towards the ground and slowly clenched it tightly. There were naturally clods of soil filling the place deep inside. After all this was done, the stalagmite heaved a sigh of relief, and his tense face relaxed 3 points. However, when he looked around the crowd, his face couldn't help but become gloomy. Huang Xian died, and Chen Lingling was not rescued. This operation can be said to have completely failed. Boss, what should we do now? A B-level awakener looked at him and asked in a low voice. Hearing this, the stalagmite sighed, and said slowly, I can only retreat. Everyone retreat in batches, do a good job of concealment, and turn to silence for the time being. Hearing such instructions, everyone nodded. For now, that's the only way to go. Afterwards, they each bid farewell to the stalagmite and prepared to leave. This billiard hall was a retreat they had prepared before they acted, so they were not worried about exposing themselves when they went out. The B-level who spoke earlier led the two of them to leave first. He pushed open the door of the room and came to the hall full of desks outside. There is no light in the hall, and the vision is very dim. However, the B-level still saw the man sitting on the sofa at a glance. Subconsciously, doubts arose in his heart, wondering why someone appeared here. But in the next moment, he suddenly discovered that the man had disappeared strangely. At the same time, a light palm rested on his shoulder, and a low voice came from his ear. Shish. Qin Mo let out a breath slowly. To be precise, what he spit out was extremely low-temperature cold air transformed by super-compressed lungs. A layer of pure white frost started from this grade B's head, and quickly spread to his whole body, freezing him into an ice cube. An ice sculpture suddenly appeared in the hall. Although grade B was still conscious, he couldn't take any action. It seems to work well. These were the last words heard by the B-level awakened. Immediately afterwards, Qin Mo waved his palm, and the ice cube and his head fell to the ground together. As for the two people who came out with him, they couldn't escape the end of death. Afterwards, Qin Mo pushed open the door of the billiards room, looked at the astonished crowd inside with a smile, and asked, What number are you from Tiandaway? The voice fell to the ground, and no one spoke. The stalagmite looked over Qin Mo's body, saw the head of the B rank rolled to the ground through the gap, and also saw his expression of panic and bewilderment before he died. Boom! The ground surged, and a soil thorn about 10 feet long suddenly emerged from Qin Mo's feet, intending to pierce his heart directly. Being able to kill a B-level awakener silently, the guy at the door is at least the best among A-level awakeners. However, why would an A-level appear here? The stalagmite couldn't figure out how it was exposed. But facing Qin Mo, he didn't dare to neglect in the slightest, and he did his best to strike. At the same time that the soil thorn appeared, the walls around Qin Mo also twisted, squeezing towards him. The other awakened people in the room also acted together at this moment, cooperating very tacitly. However, this is of no use at all. They couldn't even break through Qin Mo's defense. Otherwise, how could Qin Mo come here alone? While speaking, the soil thorn carrying a powerful force came into contact with his body. Then, under the shocked eyes of the stalagmites, the soil thorns cracked inch by inch, like an egg hitting a rock. At the same time, Qin Mo's eyes were once again filled with crimson light. Chi. In the next second, two high-temperature rays shot out, reaching the chest of the stalagmite in an instant. Immediately, a hole the size of a human head appeared on his chest, running through the front and back. Hey! The stalagmite opened its mouth slightly, squeezed the remaining air in the trachea, and issued his last words from his throat. Boom! Then, he naturally leaned forward and fell heavily to the ground. At this moment, the atmosphere in the room suddenly fell into a strange stagnation, as if time stood still. Qin Mo still had his hands behind his back, he just turned his head to look at the last high-level awakened person in the room, and said with a smile. Now, it's your turn. Chapter 71. 2 flowers bloom, each representing a branch. Just when the stalagmite led the Tiandaway people to the pre-evacuation point, Limo also came to the side of the building. A group of people looked at the huge lizard corpse in front of them, and they were all silent, but the expressions on their faces became more and more exciting. After a long silence, Li Yi let out a long breath and said slowly, "If I read correctly, this should be an A-level mimic awakener." Limo nodded, his brows raised. He really wanted to keep calm, but it was hard to do. An A-level body was directly divided into 2 halves. If the body was not right in front of his eyes, he would not have believed it. Of course, the fall of grade A didn't shock him so much. The key lies in the time of fall. For a powerhouse of this level, there will inevitably be a lot of movement when they fight, but the time just now doesn't add up to 20 seconds. This means that this person was killed in seconds. So, what kind of strength does the opponent have? Limo couldn't imagine that he didn't witness what happened in Jinmao Tower last time, otherwise his expression should be the same as usual. Check the body and make a death report, Limo said. When the words fell, the lean man standing behind him immediately nodded in agreement, and then prepared to step forward. However, at this moment, a faint voice sounded from behind everyone. There is no need to check. Limo and others turned their heads to look, only to see Limo walking slowly from a distance with his hands behind his back. A faint dragon's prestige also gradually pervaded, pressing on everyone, making them involuntarily feel a sense of submission. Everyone present, whether it was Limo of B level or Li Yi of A level, all lowered their heads and did not dare to look directly at Limo. With less than S level strength, no one can withstand the gaze of dragon eyes. This is the hand of the fire awakened. He walked to the side of the crowd, looked at the lizard's body, and said lightly. A person arranged by father? Limo asked. Limo's old face froze, and the corners of his mouth twitched slightly, but he finally nodded and said. That's right. As soon as these words came out, everyone was no longer in doubt. Although, they don't know at all, when did the Qingyang Li family have such a fire awakener who was close to S rank? However, the patriarch has said so can there be a lie? Furthermore, the corpse of the giant lizard is still here. However, they didn't know that Limo had scolded Qin Mo 180 times in his heart. He is a dignified Dakan Li Guogong, an S-level awakened person, the director of the security bureau, and he is going to be reduced to the point where he wipes his ass for this guy. If Qin Mo had agreed to his invitation to enter the Li family in Qingyang before, why would he need to hide it now? Limo said that he was very dissatisfied with Qin Mo. However, dissatisfaction is dissatisfaction, buttocks should be wiped or wiped. Who made Qin Mo's talent so ridiculously high? Li Mook witnessed everything tonight. It was his plan to lure the snake out of the hole, so of course he would be there in person to ensure that there would be no accidents. The vast majority of Qingyang Li's power is not in the imperial capital, but distributed in the border and Qingyang County. There is not much manpower available in the imperial capital. Limo had no choice but to work harder and do it himself. Even if Qin Mo didn't come tonight, the security bureau would be like a fortified wall. It's just like last time at Jinmao Tower, it wasn't his turn to make a move at all. Father, the Tiandaway also dispatched an A-level man who controlled the earth element this time. We failed to keep him, and he escaped by means. Limo frowned slightly. He wanted to kill the stalagmites together, and took the opportunity to cut off a wing of the Tiandaway. However, they were unable to track them down, so they had to rely on Limo to act. As soon as Limo heard what he said, he immediately understood what he meant. I saw him slowly raise the corners of his mouth and let out a sneer. The dragon prestige around him became more and more mighty. Don't worry, he can't escape. In Limo's 2 pupils, the reflection of the billiard hall slowly emerged. He has been monitoring the audience and has already locked the stalagmite with Longwei. Immediately afterwards, he was about to make a move. But, who knew that at this moment, the billiard hall reflected in the pupils suddenly shone with 2 crimson rays of light. Limo. That's right, Qin Mo got ahead again. He froze on the spot for a moment, the corner of his mouth twitched, and Longwei gradually returned to his body. Seeing this, Limo couldn't help raising his head in doubt. not understanding why Li Mo suddenly stopped. Facing everyone's gaze, Li Mo took a deep breath, and then announced a location. No. 368, Changye Avenue, Yunlong Billiards Hall. Bring a few more people to collect the body of the person who ran away from the Tiandaway just now. When the voice fell to the ground, he disappeared in place, and there was no need to stay any longer. Li Mo. He and Li Yi looked at each other, and the two looked at each other, both seeing the doubt in the other's eyes. To collect the body. Could it be that this solved it? But Li Mo didn't move here, unless. Hiss. Where is this fire type A level awakener so sacred? Li Mo and Li Yi became more and more confused, but they were also more shocked. Just at this moment, a speeding car rushed to the gate of the security bureau. Li Yuan and the others arrived late. They looked at the cracked earth and rocks in front of the building with serious expressions, and they were ready to fight. Soon, Li Yuan saw Li Mo and others at the corner. She glanced at the lizard's body, frowned, and asked in a low voice, "Where is the enemy?" "Oh, it's solved," Li Mo said lightly, returning to his usual look. Hearing this, all the people who rushed over were all stunned. Li Yuan was extremely puzzled, but before she could continue asking, Li Mo had already walked by her side and said at the same time, "A few people come with me and prepare to collect the corpse." Li Yuan. At this time, Qin Mo didn't care about Li Mo and the others. After he dealt with the stalagmite, he burst out at his limit speed and went home to get ready to rest. When Li Mo and the others arrived at the pool hall, Qin Mo was already sitting on the sofa. He crossed his legs, leaned against the soft sofa back, and grasped a small whip in his hand. This whip is about a foot long, the whole body is khaki, and it feels like cowhide to the touch. It doesn't seem to be anything special. However, this is actually an elemental crystal precipitated by an A-level elemental awakener, and it is also Qin Mo's spoils tonight. He picked up the whip and whipped it in the air, and there was a loud bang. At the same time, the earth element quickly condensed and turned into a triangular pyramid, stabbing fiercely in the direction of Qin Mo's twitching. He raised his hand to grab the triangular pyramid, looked at it for a few moments, and crushed it easily, avoiding destroying the furniture at home. Obviously, this is an offensive element crystallization. It seems that the same order, the same element, the final precipitated things may be completely different. The randomness is so strong. What is the principle of this? Qin Mo murmured softly. The last time I saw the elemental crystals precipitated by the awakened earth element was on Li Yuan's body. At that time, she tore off the pendant around her neck, and condensed a khaki mask to protect herself. It was a defensive elemental crystal, which was completely opposite to the small leather whip in Qin Mo's hand. Therefore, he will have the previous doubts. But at present, it seems that no one can give him an answer. There are too many secrets hidden in human genes. For example, how did human beings awaken in the first place, and how did they develop their genetic potential step by step? Why are there three major awakening systems? For the Millennium family, this may not be a secret, but Qin Mo is different. He does not have the authority in this regard yet. However, Qin Mo didn't think much about it. Anyway, he took a completely different path. It doesn't matter how other people develop their genes, he just needs to bask in the sun every day and slowly accumulate the sun's energy. With my current strength, it can be said that it is very easy to kill an A-level in seconds, but it should not have reached the level of an S-level awakened person. I don't know how much worse it is. Qin Mo thought to himself. His attack, defense, speed and detection have far surpassed A-level, and he has grown very rapidly. Especially the awakening of biological force field and thermal vision, which greatly improved Qin Mo's strength. But thinking about it, although it has not reached the level of S rank, it is not far behind, and it can't be said that it is the difference between heaven and earth. Thinking of this, Qin Mo couldn't help but raise the corners of his mouth, revealing a smile. He got up from the sofa, opened the corner drawer, and threw the small leather whip into it. In addition to the knuckles obtained a few days ago, there was also an irregular black stone about the size of a fist in the drawer. This is the relic of the Holy Spirit separated by Huang Xian. Although Qin Mo walks fast, he will not let go of the spoils that belong to him. The black stone is also an attack-type relic. After being activated, it will melt and cover the user's arm, turning into a glove, bringing great power. Qin Mo had already tried it on the way here, but the strength was average, not even as good as that knuckle, and it was troublesome to use, which seemed to be related to his own strength. The knuckle tiger was produced by number 4 or number 5 of the Tiandaway, and the stalagmites and Huangxian who appeared tonight were obviously behind them. Number 9 was arrested, and Tiandaway lost another 4 A levels. I don't know what they plan to do next. Qin Mo whispered to himself, but this kind of thing should be left to Qingyang Li to figure it out. He shook his head, took off his clothes, and walked towards the bathroom. Soon, the sound of salsa water sounded. Late at night, Linjun. Although Linjun is small, but because it is close to the emperor, it is often used as a temporary resting place by passers-by. There are mixed fish and dragons here, and the local residents only occupy a small part. The last time the security department carried out a mission and handed over the elemental crystals to the border, it was here. Now, the Tiandaway also came here. Under the dense darkness, the middle-aged man stood alone on the rooftop, looking in the direction of the imperial capital. His face was no longer as calm as before, and his slightly wrinkled brows couldn't hide his worried eyes. Hiss, who? The middle-aged man exhaled a puff of smoke slowly, his expression became more and more worried. Most of the Tiandaway's power has turned from the bright side to a silent state, and even he has temporarily withdrawn from the imperial capital. This is an unavoidable choice, and he doesn't want to, but now Tiandaway can no longer continue to lose. From the 4th to the 8th, all died in this short week, and the 9th was captured alive, and the 3rd was still working as an undercover agent for the Li family in Qingyang, so he is the only one who can take charge at present. But the other party has some kind of secret and unknown detection method, and the imperial capital is obviously not safe. Jingle bell. Suddenly, the cell phone rang suddenly, which seemed so harsh in the silent night. The middle-aged man took out his mobile phone from his pocket, connected it to his ear, and said calmly, "Hello. The big fish is fierce, I'm afraid it will be hard to catch." The voice of number 3 came from the phone. "Since you can't catch it, let's wait, don't be in a hurry," the middle-aged man said slowly. Hearing this, there was silence on the other end of the phone, only the sound of footsteps kept ringing. After a long time, Secretary Li's voice sounded again. "Now I'm afraid I can't wait, so I have to act quickly. Mrs. Li has secretly dispatched spiritual awakeners from their old nest, Qingyang County. When the time comes, number 9's side will definitely be exposed." As soon as these words came out, the middle-aged man's face became serious. He took a deep breath of cigarettes, his eyes kept changing, and he was constantly evaluating in his heart. Is there a specific time? If you want to reorganize the offensive force, it is not something that can be done in 3 or 2 days. Only 1 day at most. 1 day, the middle-aged man murmured repeatedly, his brows furrowed even tighter. He said, 1 day is definitely not enough. Even if I do it myself, it is impossible to save no. 9. Li Shi is obviously using number 9 as a bait to lure us into the bait. If we go now, we will die. If you want not to be exposed, you don't have to save people. Secretary Li said slowly. You mean? The middle-aged man's pupils narrowed sharply. The moment he heard these words, he had already understood the meaning. As Qin Mo said to Li Mo before, if the problem cannot be solved, the person who raised the problem will be solved. Well, if you want to ensure that number 9 does not expose key information, it is actually okay. Get rid of number 9. Only the mouth of the dead is the most serious. If you want to achieve great things, you must sacrifice. Secretary Li replied in a deep voice. However, the middle-aged man was silent. There was bitterness in the corner of his mouth, and a look of struggle appeared in his eyes, and he said in a low voice, number 9 is loyal to the organization, she. It is precisely because she is absolutely loyal to the organization that the moment she joins us, she should have the awareness of sacrifice and be ready to sacrifice. Before the middle-aged man could say a word, Secretary Li suddenly raised his voice and interrupted him. With a firm tone, he continued, the ideal of the organization is above all else. When necessary, I can die, and you can die as well. The voice fell, and the two sides fell into silence again. The soot was like fallen autumn leaves, hovering and falling to the ground, the sparks were gradually extinguished, and the cigarette was finally burned to the end. Call. The middle-aged man let out a long breath, his brows slowly opened, and his eyes returned to clarity. Enable 3 of spades, he said lightly, his eyes were extremely firm. Obviously, he has made a choice. The next day, the Security Bureau. Chin Mo picked up his newly bought thermos and took a sip of hot water slowly. Then, he turned his head and looked out the window, only to see that the square in front of the building was under construction. Although the battle last night lasted only for a short time, it still caused considerable damage to the building. So this morning, the higher-ups arranged for a construction team to come. Looking at the current progress, it will probably be finished tomorrow. The efficiency is still very high, but the noise is a bit loud. However, this did not have any impact on their work. After all, there was nothing to do, except drinking tea and fishing. Chin Mo was still the same as before, just kept fishing until he got off work, and today's light energy points just happened to be accumulated at this time. He opened the Gene Awakening panel and saw that there were 18 light energy points that could be distributed freely. Chin Mo didn't think too much, and directly distributed according to the plan he had decided in advance. For him now, eyesight and strength are already ahead of other attributes by a large margin. In order to ensure a balanced development in all aspects, these two need to be put aside first. For the remaining 6 attributes, just add 3 points each. The warm current quickly permeated Chin Mo's whole body, strengthening him in an all-round way. Speed, 78, awakening skill, 10 times the speed of sound. 10 times the speed of sound, that is 3,400 meters per second. And this is not Chin Mo's limit speed, you know, he has already reached 8 times the speed of sound before this. Now, he estimates that if he explodes with all his strength, he should be able to reach 15 times the speed of sound. How much, however, is unclear. It seems that I should try it later, Chin Mo thought to himself. Afterwards, he stood up with his thermos in his mouth, ready to leave the Security Bureau. Su Yin hurriedly carried the lambskin bag to his side, and asked with a smile, "Yeah, do you want to have dinner together, little handsome guy?" If you don't go to the 3 Treasures Palace for nothing, what's the matter with Sister Su?" Chin Mo frowned. Hearing this, Su Yin curled her lips and said, "Really, is this the image of sister in your heart?" This, Chin Mo stroked his chin, put on a look of deep thought, then nodded solemnly, and said, "Yes, screw you." Su Yin rolled his eyes at him, and the two followed each other down the stairs. "How about allowing you to be my sister's boyfriend tonight?" Hearing this, Chin Mo turned his head to look at her, with a puzzled look on his face, and said vigilantly, "It's not good, isn't Sister Su looking for an awakened boyfriend?" "What is it for?" "Hi, just tonight." Su Yin grabbed his arm and sighed. "My family arranged a blind date for me, and I'm not willing to go, but there's no other way, just pretend to be my boyfriend and let the other party quit in spite of the difficulties." Chin Mo, he thought it was something, but he didn't expect it to be this. "You have to do my sister this favor, my sister is always so kind to you, huh?" Su Yin blinked, trying to squeeze out a few tears, but in the end there was nothing, so she had to give up pretending to be pitiful, and instead shook Chin Mo's arm to act coquettishly. "Sister treats you to lunch for a week, how about it?" Cough cough. Hearing this, Chin Mo couldn't help coughing lightly, nodded, and replied, "That's fine." "Well, my sister knows that you are the best, and it is true that my sister loves you the most." Su Yin frowned and smiled. Afterwards, she took the initiative to hold Chin Mo's hand, and said, "You have to pretend to be a little bit." "Hiss, if that's the case, would Sister Su come home with me tonight?" Chin Mo joked with a smile. "It depends on your performance. If you perform well, it's not impossible." Just when the two drove Su Yin's car out of the Security Bureau, Li Yin, the director of the Intelligence Department, also put down his work at this time. He signed his name on the last document, then closed the folder and capped the fine black pen. This pen was something he just got at noon today. It is extremely brand new and extremely valuable at the same time. Under the seemingly ordinary appearance, there is a terrifying power hidden. If it weren't for insiders, no one would have guessed that this black pen was actually a relic of the Holy Spirit precipitated by an A-level awakened person. Li Yin turned the pen slowly, his eyes lingering on the line of small characters engraved on the pen body for a long time. The small characters are written in italics, one of which is engraved on the cap of the pen. This line of fine print is 3 of spades. Afterwards, he put the pen into his coat pocket, got up and left his office, and walked down from the 8th floor. Li Yin is 32 years old this year, but he has not yet married. He has always told others that in their line of work, his family will only become his concern. This kind of awareness made him stand out quickly in the Li family of Qingyang, and he was appointed as the director of the intelligence department of the Security Bureau 3 years ago. Although he is young, his prestige in the intelligence department is very high, which is enough to prove his skills and Li Shi's trust in him. Enter the elevator, press the floor, and the elevator door slowly closes. At the same time, Li Yin also slowly raised the corners of his mouth, revealing a smile of unknown meaning. He raised his hands to straighten his neckline and smooth the folds of his clothes. The movements were extremely slow but meticulous, as if he was tidying up his remains. The elevator soon reached the second basement floor. The moment the door opened, the smile on his face had disappeared, and he had returned to his usual working appearance. "Director Li Yin, what's the matter with you?" Li Yi turned to look at him and asked doubtfully. Hearing this, Li Yin's face remained unchanged. He walked to Li Yi's side, looked up at the cell in front, and asked without answering. "When will she wake up? Our intelligence agency has been waiting for a long time. When you wake up is not something you should care about, and even if you wake up later, your intelligence department will not have the opportunity to interrogate." Li Yi said lightly. As an A-level awakener, he naturally didn't need to give Li Yin face. Everyone in the Security Bureau knew what was going on in the intelligence department, so there was no need to say anything. If the inner ghost cannot be found out in one day, then Chen Lingling will definitely not be handed over to them for interrogation. It is precisely because of this that I am more eager to get the result from her mouth, and I can no longer let the ghost continue to do whatever it wants. Li Yin opened his mouth slowly. He was always facing the cell, his chest was straight, and he didn't change his posture. "You can talk to the young master about these things." Li Yi looked at him quietly, and said lightly, "Now, you should leave, this is not the place you should come." Hearing this, Li Yin slowly moved his gaze away, turned to look at Li Yi, and asked, "Can I come closer and see her?" "Of course not, what are you going to do?" Li Yi frowned, with strength surging in his body. He was keenly aware that something was wrong with Li Yin today. Seeing this, Li Yin sighed helplessly, shook his head, and said, "Okay." Immediately afterwards, he raised his arm and stretched towards his jacket pocket, trying to take down the pen. Boom! Li Yi stretched out his hand like lightning, tightly wrapped around his wrist, and stopped his next move. "Don't make any extra movements, just leave as you came," Li Yi said in a deep voice. His pupils had become the gaze of an eagle, piercing people's hearts. In just a short moment, he scanned Li Mo carefully from top to bottom. The pen first caught his attention, and the 3 of spades printed on it was emitting a shimmering light at this moment. The shimmer is black, almost integrated with the pen. If you don't look carefully, you really can't see it. Li Yi's pupils shrank sharply. He didn't know what happened, but this abnormal phenomenon is definitely not a good thing. Hee. Before he could react, Li Yin's laughter suddenly rang in his ears. He looked calm and said with a smile, "Say hello to Patriarch for me." When the words fell to the ground, a muffled sound suddenly came from his mind, his eyes quickly lost their luster, and the smile froze forever on his face. Immediately afterwards, Li Yin's neck twisted and he died. All of this happened between lightning and flint, and it happened extremely abruptly. Li Yi's face changed suddenly, and he suddenly turned his head to look at the cell. Chen Lingling was still lying there quietly, as if she was the same as before. However, with his sharp eagle eyes, how could he fail to see that Chen Lingling's chest was no longer rising and falling, and her nose wings were no longer fluttering? Obviously, she has completely lost her breath of life. At this moment, Li Yi's face was extremely ugly. Li family in Qingyang, the manor castle. In the side room, Li Mo was still sitting on the grand teacher's chair with a calm expression. Besides him, there were 3 other people in the room, namely Secretary Li Mo and an elegant middle-aged man. The refined man was sitting at the lower seat, holding a pot of hot tea that had just been served, and the teacups jingled and jingled, steaming steam came out. He closed his eyes and sniffed lightly, then his face revealed a look of intoxication, and he said with a smile, "The Dahongpao must be the most authentic one in the imperial capital. I haven't tasted it for 5 years." If you like it, you can stay in the imperial capital for a while longer. Li Mo said slowly. Hearing this, Li Changqing frowned, put down the teacup to look at him, and asked, Patriarch, is the imperial capital already in such a mess? Hey, when will this world be so peaceful and stable? It's just that there are a few more restless in their hearts. Li Mo sneered. Hearing this, Li Changqing nodded slightly to show his agreement. Where is the person? I will solve the troubles of the Tiandaway first. Li Changqing said that he is the spiritual awakener Li Mo dispatched from Qingyang County, and he is not an ordinary spiritual system but very strong. People are in the security bureau, we can directly. Li Mo answered. However, before he could say anything, the cell phone rang suddenly in the room. Li Mo took out his mobile phone, glanced at the screen display, frowned slightly, raised his head and said to Li Mo, Father, it's Li Yi's call. Then, he pressed the connect button to turn on the hands-free, and Li Yi's urgent voice quickly rang out in the room. My lord, something went wrong. Li Yin is the inner ghost. He killed number 9 with an unknown relic of the Holy Spirit. As soon as these words were spoken, the faces of the few people changed immediately. Li Mo slowly clenched the armrest of the Grand Teacher's chair, his eyes were extremely dangerous, and a faint dragon power rose quietly, filling the air. Li Mo and the others froze for a moment, as if a mountain was pressing on their backs, but Li Changqing didn't react, and remained the same as before. Changqing, can you read the memory of the dead? Li Mo asked. No, Li Changqing shook his head and explained. If I was an ordinary person, I might still give it a try, but since she is an awakened person of the spiritual system, I can't. Hearing these words, Long Wei gradually faded away, and Li Mo's eyes became calm again. The matter has come to this point, anxiety and anger are just a waste of time, and can only be accepted calmly. Li Yin. Li Mo looked ahead and murmured softly. Next, I will leave the imperial capital to you. He said to Li Changqing, then got up from the Grand Master's chair, and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Patriarch, please rest assured. Li Changqing picked up the teacup again with a carefree expression. Even Chen Lingling can ensure that there are no ghosts in the world, so Li Changqing, who is stronger than her, naturally has this ability. Only in this way, the Li family's children who are now in the imperial capital will inevitably feel panic. The connection between bloodlines will often be a powerful fetter, but it is also an invisible shackle. Li Mo has always been unwilling to do this, but now he can no longer be indecisive. In troubled times, heavy codes should be used. Seeing Li Changqing smile, the look in the depths of Secretary Li's eyes kept changing, and he didn't know what he was thinking. After Li Mo left, Li Mo quickly left the manor and rushed to the security bureau, where he needed to take care of the aftermath. Secretary Li didn't say much. After leaving the side room, he dealt with his own affairs as usual, and went to bed directly at 1 o'clock in the morning, without any changes. It was the same when he woke up the next day, and he didn't have a logical opportunity to leave Li's manor until the security bureau had something to deal with in the afternoon. And after he left, he didn't dare to contact the Tiandaway immediately, and he didn't let out a sigh of relief until the distance was far enough. The pressure Li Changqing brought to him was really too great, and the risk of exposure was too great when talking in the manor. Taking advantage of this time, Secretary Li quickly took out his phone and dialed the secret number. It has been confirmed that number 9 was sacrificed, and Li Changqing has entered the imperial capital. He said quickly. Li Changqing, why did he come here? This is troublesome. The middle-aged man continued with a solemn tone. With him here, I'm afraid that all the nails we've laid will be pulled out soon. You should find a chance to withdraw first. No, now is not the time for me to withdraw. Secretary Li took up the conversation and refused directly. Keeping it is just to die in vain. Now that the general situation is gone, first preserve the vitality and leave it for a useful body, so that you can slowly figure it out in the future. The middle-aged man frowned and his face was full of worry. The current situation was extremely unfavorable to them. In the recent period of time, only a little bit of advantage was taken at the beginning, and then there was a constant loss of soldiers and generals, not to mention the loss of a dozen high-ranking people, and a relic of the Holy Spirit. If the remaining people suffer any losses, the Tiandaway will not need to make any troubles, it can be disbanded directly. Within 5 days, you and others must withdraw. Number 3, this is an order. The middle-aged man shouted. However, Secretary Li's face did not change at all, and he only heard him say lightly, "Continue to lurk, this is also an order." He paused, and then said, "Order number 1. Number 1. Hearing these 2 words, the middle-aged man's eyes flickered, his expression shocked. The number 1 Shenlong can't see the end, when will he? Just as he was speaking, a light palm rested on his shoulder, and at the same time a man's voice rang in his ear. "Shishui, your heart is still too soft." The middle-aged man's body froze in place. He put down his phone, turned around slowly, his throat rolled, and saw an old man with white beard and hair gradually entering his line of sight. "Since you want to catch big fish, how can you not be willing to put more bait?" The old man smiled and said, he was wearing an ordinary Chinese tunic suit, without any special aura all over his body, he seemed to be an ordinary old man. The middle-aged man didn't know when he appeared here, and he didn't know how long he had stood behind him. He couldn't feel his existence at all. But it is such an old man with a kind face who ranks number 1 in the Tiandaway, possesses a supreme status, and far beyond the terrifying strength of others. At the same time, Security Bureau, Security Department. The warm sunlight penetrated the glass and sprinkled all of Chinmo's body. He is currently sitting at his desk, while dealing with the light work at hand, while listening to news from the Bureau. After accompanying Su Yin to deal with a dinner yesterday, he headed straight for home and verified his limit speed along the way. The result was pretty much the same as his previous prediction. When he activated the biological stance and exploded at full speed, he could reach 5,000 meters per second, almost 15 times the speed of sound. Afterwards, Chinmo washed up and went to sleep. Unexpectedly, when he came today, he found that something was wrong with the Security Bureau, and Li Yuan's face was also very ugly. After some investigation, Chinmo learned that something big happened after get off work yesterday. Li Yin, the director of the intelligence department, died. More importantly, Chen Lingling is also dead. Chinmo was not surprised that Li Yin was the ghost. Needless to say, Tiandaway has done a good job in arranging undercover agents. The main thing he couldn't figure out was how did Li Yin kill Chen Lingling. You know, the gap between A level and B level is not small. Chinmo knew who the guard of the underground cell was, but Li Yin was able to kill someone under the nose of an A-level awakened person. What method did this guy use? He was very puzzled, but unfortunately he was not there last night and did not see what happened. In order not to leak the news, even killing one of our own people, the Tiandaway is really cold-blooded, but after this encounter, the clues that were finally obtained may be broken again. No wonder the team leader seems to be in a bad mood today. Quote. Chinmo looked up at the small office, and saw Li Yuan standing by the familiar window again, took out a thin cigarette, put it on his red lips and lit it slowly. He shook his head, took a few casual glances, then stopped looking, and continued to deal with the work at hand. It wasn't until after 4 o'clock that he finished dealing with it leisurely. Chinmo leaned back on the chair, put his hands behind his head, looked at the red-hot sunset in the distance, and muttered softly. I haven't fished with my brother for a long time, and I don't know how his company is doing recently. Thinking this way, Chinmo took out his mobile phone and sent a text message to Li Mo, asking if he was free tonight. Li Mo quickly gave his affirmative reply, but it was getting late today, so the two made an appointment to meet at the old place after get off work and have barbecue together. Putting down the phone, a faint smile appeared on the corner of Chinmo's mouth, and he was in a good mood. Going to work to bask in the sun and touch the fish, and after get off work to go fishing and eat with a few friends, peaceful and leisurely, this is the life he wants. Chinmo felt that this was very good. It would be better if Wu Tiandi would come out to make trouble. He thought so. Just as the thought flashed in his heart, Chinmo opened the genetic awakening panel with a quick look. Light energy points. 24, freely assignable. Today's light energy points have been accumulated again, and he continues to improve the 6 attributes other than vision and strength according to the distribution plan determined in advance. Chinmo allocated 3 points to each item first, and then added 2 points to hearing and recovery for the remaining 4 points. In this way, all attributes have reached 80 points and above, and the highest vision is no more than 90, which is in line with balanced development. The warm current quickly spread to Chinmo's whole body, and at the same time, a message suddenly appeared. Strengthen. Biological force field. Chin Mo's face showed a strange expression. The biological force field has actually been strengthened. Doesn't this mean? Will his own gravity be weakened again? I don't know how much it has been strengthened, whether it can fly. Chin Mo thought to himself. He can't wait to experiment now, but the office is obviously not the right place. Chin Mo glanced at the clock hanging on the wall, and saw that there were still 2 or 3 minutes to get off work. So, he waited for a while, took advantage of this time to tidy up his workstation, and when it was just after 5 o'clock, he got up and walked out of the office. After leaving the Security Bureau building, the warm current in Chin Mo's body just happened to disappear. This time it diffused for a little longer than before. Obviously the strengthening of the force field is very unusual. Moreover, his body shape has changed again, and his height has grown by 1 centimeter on the original basis, from 190 to 191, and the line ratio has changed accordingly. This is the last time Chin Mo grew up, and no matter how much his strength grows in the future, his body will remain the same. Because, 191 centimeters, this is exactly the height of Krypton Superman. Walking on the street, the corners of Chin Mo's mouth slowly turned up, revealing a smile. At the same time, with a thought in his mind, he quietly activated the biological force field, and the gravity quickly began to change. Chin Mo suddenly stopped and stood where he was, and his position seemed to be different from before. He seemed a little taller. Of course, it's not that Chin Mo has grown taller again. If you look closely at the soles of his feet, you will find a slight gap between the shoes and the ground. The gap was only 2 centimeters, and no abnormalities could be seen from a condescending height, so Chin Mo did not attract the attention of passers-by. In short, he seems to be standing now, but he is actually floating. The strengthening this time directly allowed Chin Mo to hang in the air. It's a pity that the current force field doesn't weaken gravity enough. I can only hang in the air, but I still can't fly. Chin Mo whispered to himself, but the smile on his face became more intense, and he was not disappointed by it. Anyway, the accumulation of light energy points is very fast, and every 3 or 4 days there will be a huge change in strength. It won't be long before he can really soar in the sky. Moreover, despite the fact that he is only suspended by 2 centimeters, this is not Chin Mo's limit at all. He just didn't want to cause a commotion among passers-by by suddenly floating more than 10 meters on the street. After confirming the extent to which the biological force field had been strengthened, Chin Mo landed on the ground again and walked towards the agreed place at night. It will be past 5 o'clock, and the two agreed to meet at 7 o'clock, so he looks leisurely, and his steps are not fast, and he is not in a hurry. In this way, an hour passed quietly. Chin Mo had just walked halfway, when a phone call suddenly interrupted his original itinerary. The call was from Li Yuan, and after he picked it up, a short sentence came from the speaker immediately. Within half an hour, gather at the square of the Security Bureau building. There is an urgent mission tonight. Hearing this, Chin Mo frowned slightly, and he could hear the unusualness of this mission from Li Yuan's dignified tone. This kind of emergency summoning order occasionally happens on weekdays. All the people in the Security Bureau who receive the summoning order must immediately put down what they are doing and rush to the assembly point. It was like the text message Li Yuan received that night, but the emergency summoning order was at a higher level and was only aimed at important cadres. Today's level is lower, but Chin Mo faintly feels that this mission will have something to do with heaven and earth. However, whatever it was, his dinner tonight was a mess. Chin Mo called back to Li Yuan, then hung up the phone and shook his head secretly. He looked around, then turned and walked into a small wonton shop on the side of the road. At the same time, he sent a text message to Li Mo, telling him that he had something to do at work tonight, and he had to rush back to work overtime temporarily, so he had to make an appointment another day. 5 minutes later, Li Mo returned the message, expressing his understanding. After settling these things, Chin Mo ate 3 big bowls of wontons, filling his stomach as the most important thing. After eating, there are still 10 minutes before the half-hour of assembly. Chin Mo took a few more random steps along the side of the road to eat and drink. It was not until 2 minutes left that he flashed his figure and burst out with his own speed. A few seconds later, he appeared near the Security Bureau and walked slowly towards the assembly point. Li Yuan arrived early and had been waiting here for a long time. She stood beside the black off-road vehicle with indifferent eyes and said nothing. Seeing Qin Mo approaching, she nodded slightly at him, and then continued to maintain the appearance of keeping strangers away. Qin Mo passed Li Yuan, stood behind her, and glanced left and right. It wasn't just their 7 groups that gathered tonight, there were also 3 groups with a total of 45 people, among whom 30 were awakened. It seems like a big move, Qin Mo thought to himself. At the same time, Li Yuan looked around the team members and said calmly, "Get in the car." Yes, everyone replied in unison, and got into the car in batches. The sound of the engine gradually roared, and a car drove out of the Security Bureau building and merged into the night. Our task tonight is to cooperate with the other 3 groups to destroy a den of Tiandaway in Tianyan district. After getting in the car, Li Yuan immediately began to arrange the action plan, and she continued, "At that time, Qin Mo and Su Yin, you just need to stay on the outermost perimeter to guard and watch, and the rest will follow behind me. The terrain of the operation site this time is complicated, please check the map in advance." As expected, while driving the car, Qin Mo thought to himself, "Sure enough, it's the Tiandaway. I don't know where this information came from. It's not reliable." This is not the first time that the Security Bureau has dispatched such a mission, but it is basically a trap deliberately set by the other party, thus losing several awakened people. Although Li Yin, the director of the intelligence department, is dead, who can guarantee that no other ghosts are still lurking? If this is another trick. Tisk. However, Qin Mo is not alone in having such doubts. Wang Yan, who was sitting in the back seat, frowned and asked, "Team leader, is the information accurate this time?" Hearing this, Li Yuan raised her head and squinted her eyes. Her face became colder and colder. She said calmly, "Don't worry, this time, everything will be safe. Tiandaway will definitely pay the due price." She didn't say the specific source of the information, but her eyes revealed extremely strong confidence. Because, tonight's news was directly learned by Li Changqing from the inside ghost's mind. In this way, a group of dozens of people quickly arrived at the preset action location, which was a parking lot. Qin Mo opened the holographic field of vision to cover the entire venue, and soon found the traces of the Tiandaway. There were 17 awakened people scattered in 2s and 3s. Among these people, there is not even a high-ranking person. Li Yuan and the others will definitely be able to eat them. And it seemed that they didn't have the slightest defense at all, nor did they have any ambushes, as if they really didn't know anything. It's really reliable information, Qin Mo muttered in a low voice, frowning slightly. He always felt that something was wrong, it was not in line with the usual style of Tiandaway. However, from the beginning to the end of the battle, there were no accidents at all. The Security Bureau only paid the price of 5 people being slightly injured, and wiped out the opponent completely destroying this den. Night, 10:20. Qin Mo wiped his body clean, walked out of the bathroom, and headed for the bedroom. It was less than half an hour since he got home. Although tonight's operation ended quickly, it still took a lot of time to deal with the aftermath. Lying on the bed, looking at the ceiling, Qin Mo frowned slightly. He still felt a little abnormal. However, nothing happened during the course of action, it seemed to be just his illusion. Thinking of this, Qin Mo moved his mind, quietly let go of his hearing, and the coverage area gradually expanded, covering a radius of 110 miles in no time. He recently assigned light energy points to the hearing attribute, so the range is wider than before. Afterwards, the super brain worked quickly and began to analyze and process the massive amount of information it received. 3 minutes later, Qin Mo withdrew his hearing, but he didn't find what he wanted. I don't know whether the man playing mahjong in Tiandaway happened to be out of range, or he left the imperial capital directly. However, since you can't find it, then don't worry about it. Anyway, as long as you are strong enough, even if this is another new conspiracy of the Tiandaway, so what? Qin Mo had a clear idea, then closed his eyes, and soon fell asleep. So, nothing to say all night. The next day, he woke up early and ran to work as usual. Stuck in the 7th group of offices, Qin Mo took a thermos to get a cup of hot water, and then prepared to start today's fishing time. However, within an hour after he sat down, a new task was assigned. This time, the 4 groups from last night were dispatched together to strangle Tiandaway to hide in other hideouts in the imperial capital. Qin Mo, who was sitting in the passenger seat of the off-road vehicle, felt more and more abnormal. After going to the mission site, he found that the members of the Tiandahui here were no different from last night. There are still no high-level awakened people among the dozen or so people, there are still no traps or ambushes, and they are still not prepared. When Li Yuan and the others rushed in, those people were stunned. Qin Mo stood guard at the outermost edge, watching everything in front of him through the holographic vision, and frowned again. Yesterday, it can be said that I was caught off guard, and it is okay to be unprepared, but after a night of fermentation, it is still like this. Could it be that the Tiandahui didn't give any warning? Why does it look like an abandoned son who was deliberately discarded? Quote. He muttered in a low voice, but the battle went smoothly, and it ended in a short time, and the few people continued to deal with the aftermath. Afterwards, they didn't go back to the security bureau, but had a hasty lunch outside. This was a good thing for Qin Mo, as he would be able to absorb more solar energy. Not long after lunch, Li Yuan received another task from above, and the group hurried to another den. However, this time it was a miss. The other party seemed to have received the news in advance and evacuated to other places in time. This should be the normal reaction of the Tiandahui. In the next 2 days, the Security Bureau took actions one after another, sending awakened people to various parts of the imperial capital, and carried out precise strikes on the Tiandahui. They encountered stubborn resistance and fell into traps, but the loss of casualties was very small. Generally speaking, everything went smoothly, and Li Yuan's brows and eyes were relaxed a lot. If this momentum can be continued, it may not be long before the Heaven and Earth Society can be completely strangled and this cancerous tumor can be removed. At this time, 7 groups of offices. Su Yin stretched her waist, wantonly showing off her figure, and said, "Hey, I'm really exhausted these days. Qin Mo, do you want to go to the bar with your sister tonight to relax?" Hearing this, Qin Mo, who was sitting across from him, raised his head and smiled slightly, and said, "Let's talk about it after we've been busy for a while, who knows if there will be an emergency task at night." "Oh, it's true." Su Yin's face drooped, and she hurriedly picked up the lambskin bag from the side, and hurriedly said, "It's hard to get off work at normal time today, my sister is leaving first, and I have to hurry to have a good meal. See you tomorrow, Miss Su. See you tomorrow, handsome boy." After all, Su Yin walked out of the office first, stepping on her small leather shoes. Qin Mo turned off the computer, tidied up the desk, and followed her to get off work together. As soon as he walked out of the Security Bureau building, a warm current surged in his body. The corners of Qin Mo's mouth slowly turned up, his eyes focused on his eyes, and he quietly opened the Gene Awakening panel. Eyesight, 93. Listening, 85. Intelligence, 86. Breathing, 85. Strength, 90. Speed, 87. Recovery, 85. Defense, 86. Light energy points, 19. Freely assignable. In the past 2 days, Qin Mo has accumulated a total of 45 light energy points, all attributes are improving, and his strength is growing steadily. He had just accumulated 19 points today, and he took out 16 of them first, and allocated 2 points to each item, and the remaining 3 points were allocated to recovery, breathing, and hearing. The warm current quickly spread to the whole body, and Qin Mo only felt that every cell was full of strength. Strength, 92, Awakening, Superpower 3. With his power awakened again, Qin Mo couldn't help showing a smile on his face. You know, superpower is extremely simple and rude, each awakening has only one effect, that is, double. Double the base strength, double the ultimate strength. Unfortunately, I don't know exactly how strong it is. Qin Mo sighed. Today is different from the past, and now he can no longer look for some reference objects to test the limits of his strength as before. He still remembered that last time, he accidentally smashed a deep hole in the ground. If he tried again this time, it might really be comparable to a small earthquake. We still need a target. Qin Mo slowly clenched his hands, his muscles tensed, and the smile on his face became more intense. I don't know if my current strength can break the wrist with an S-level awakener. He murmured secretly in his heart. The manor castle is still a partial house. An elderly and beautiful woman is kneeling in front of Li Changqing. She frowned tightly, closed her eyes, a look of pain appeared on her face, and she occasionally groaned. Li Chengqing's right hand was pressing on the top of her head, and his fingers were dancing back and forth, as if he was extracting something from the woman's brain. The room was silent. Li Mo and others did not make a sound, so as not to disturb Li Chengqing. As time went by, the woman's brows became more and more wrinkled, her face gradually paled, and she would let out a muffled hum from time to time, revealing a look of struggle. After a long time, Li Chengqing opened his eyes and withdrew his right hand. The woman's body limply fell to the ground, and she fell into a severe coma. Fuyun District, Lianhua Pharmaceutical Factory, number 2 and the rest are hiding there. Li Chengqing turned to look at Li Mo, and said in a deep voice. Hearing this, Li Mo frowned. He stood up with his hands behind his back, and kept thinking in his heart. After a brief silence, he asked, "Is Li Yun number 3? I'm not sure. Her memory doesn't mention whether she is no. 3. Li Yun only knows that she is the highest-ranking male in the Li family. She used to connect directly with number 2 through no. 9. Li Chengqing replied. Road. In the past few days, he has made successive attacks and has dug out several ghosts in the Li family in Qingyang, and by reading their memory fragments, he has locked on Li Yun. Lianhua Pharmaceutical Factory. Li Mo frowned slightly and murmured softly. Afterwards, he said indifferently, Tongshan, before tomorrow morning, I want to see all the information about this pharmaceutical factory. This matter is going on in secret, so don't let the wind out. As ordered, Secretary Li replied with a bow. Tongshan was his real name. Tomorrow at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the Tiandaway will be encircled and suppressed. All members of the security department will be dispatched. Be sure not to let anyone go. The specific action plan will be notified 10 minutes before departure. Yes, Li Mo said solemnly. To ensure everything is safe, I will go to the pharmaceutical factory in person, Chengqing, and I will leave the manor to you. Li Mo turned his head and said. Hearing this, Li Chengqing smiled slightly, nodded, and replied, Patriarch, please rest assured. Li Mo nodded, looking into the distance. His pupils quietly changed into dragon eyes, full of dragon power. The code name for this operation is Thunder. There are 7 districts in the Great Qin Emperor capital, namely Lingyun District, Beiyun District, Tianyuan District, Fuyun District, Luoyuan District, Shengyun District, and Royal Restricted Area. Needless to say, the last large area is where the Emperor of Dakan is located, and the court is also set up in it. That is the core of the Great Qin's core. Absolute power within the power symbolizes the supreme status. It is extremely solemn, and ordinary people are not easily allowed to enter it, so it is called a restricted area. The Royal Restricted Area is located in the easternmost part of the imperial capital, where the first ray of sunlight that the sun casts every day will shine there. As for the Fuyun district, it is in the southwest of the imperial capital, and it is a remote suburb. It takes about half an hour to drive from the security bureau to Lianhua Pharmaceutical Factory, which is too far, so the location must be preset in advance. At this time, on the 3rd floor of the security bureau, there are 7 offices. Qin Mo sat at his workstation, held a thermos cup, and looked through the glass window at the black off-road vehicles driving out one by one below. This is already the 4th batch today. From going to work at 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. now, 12 groups have left the security bureau. It seems that they are going to perform a task, but they don't know what they are doing. He also turned on his hearing to inquire, but he didn't get any useful information, and the team leader didn't know what he was going to do. Anyway, such an order was issued from above. Qin Mo guessed that there should be another major action against the Tiandaway. With so many teams mobilized at once, could it be that an important person has been caught? He took a sip of water from his cup, thinking to himself. At this moment, Li Yuan suddenly walked out of the small office. She faced the crowd with a cold expression, and said seriously, I have a mission, I'm ready to go. The 7 groups are also dispatched. Qin Mo frowned, and at the same time he found that not only the 7 groups, but also the other 2 groups suddenly said they had tasks at this moment. Calculated in this way, the security office has dispatched 15 teams today, and nearly 100 awakened ones, which is quite a powerful force. Such a big movement made Qin Mo feel that something big might happen today. The people who heard Li Yuan's words subconsciously looked at each other, and then responded in unison. Yes. Immediately afterwards, 3 minutes later, several off-road vehicles drove them into the distance. At 2:30, Chin Mo drove them to a certain place in Luoyang district that Li Yuan said. The cars were scattered on various streets, and it was less than 50 meters away from Fuyun district. At the same time, the remaining groups of the security department also set off at this time, leading Li Mo, Li Yi and others towards the Lianhua pharmaceutical factory. Li Mo sat in the car, looking ahead with a very calm expression. He slowly clenched his fists, making a crunching sound as the joints collided. Soon, the pharmaceutical factory was right in front of us. The thin man sitting beside him raised his wrist and glanced at his watch, then raised his head and said, "Director, it's time." Li Mo hummed lightly from his nasal cavity, took the mobile phone handed by the thin man from the side, and said in a deep voice, "Everyone immediately turn off any communication equipment. 10 minutes later, Operation Thunder will start. I will now assign specific tasks to each group." His voice sounded from every off-road vehicle in the security office, word by word, orderly. Chin Mo's eyes flickered, his expression awe-inspiring. 2 flowers bloom, each representing a branch. Just when Li Mo and the others were about to start their operations, Secretary Li quickly walked into the security bureau. He took the elevator, went straight to the 3rd basement floor, and headed towards the end of the corridor. At the end of the corridor is an airtight safe room, which stores safes with extremely high security performance. As soon as Secretary Li arrived at the door, a man stood up and looked at him. This person is an A-level awakener. He stays underground all year round and has only one task throughout the year, which is to guard the important items in the safe. Before the man could open his mouth, Secretary Li looked serious and preemptively said, "On the order of the director of the Security Bureau, I'm here to get the number 3 element crystal." "I haven't received the director's order." The A-level frowned. Seeing this, Secretary Li took out a piece of paper from his pocket, handed it to him, and said, "Here are the instructions." Grade A took the paper, read it carefully, nodded and said, "Come with me." Afterwards, Secretary Li followed him into the safe room. The two of them turned 2 corners, and a safe numbered 3 appeared in front of them. That level A stepped forward to enter an extremely complicated password, and it took about 30 seconds before it ended. He opened the cabinet door and turned sideways, revealing the contents inside. I saw a black suitcase lying there quietly, and inside the box was an ice pick with blue patterns wrapped around it. This object is the elemental crystal that was brought back from the border not long ago, a piece of elemental crystallization precipitated by an S-level awakened person. Looking at the suitcase, the corners of Secretary Li's mouth curled up imperceptibly, and his eyes were extremely strange. In the afternoon, 10 past 3. The 7 groups of people have all got off the car and switched to walking. Chin Mo and the others followed behind Li Yuan, approaching the pharmaceutical factory very vigilantly. Not just the 7 groups, but other groups in the security department are collectively approaching Lianhua pharmaceutical factory from all directions. If you look at it from a high altitude, you will find that they seem to form a huge net, which is shrinking inward step by step, reducing the scope of the encirclement. The Lianhua pharmaceutical factory occupies a large area, about 5 miles. If not all the staff are mobilized, it will be too easy for people to run away. Soon, Li Yuan led them to the outer wall of the pharmaceutical factory. She nodded silently to everyone, and then stretched out her hands. As the fingers danced, the breeze floated, everyone's clothes swelled, and they felt as if they were being lifted up by the wind. "Quick!" Li Yuan shouted in a low voice. Only then did Li Changfeng and the others grab the eaves of the wall with the help of the wind, jumped up and turned down, and landed firmly inside the pharmaceutical factory. After all the awakened ones had entered, Li Yuan looked at Chin Mo, Su Yin and the others, and whispered, "Be careful." When the voice fell, she borrowed the power of the wind to also climb into the wall. Su Yin looked up at her disappearing figure, sighed heavily, and enviously said, "Hey, I wish I could be an awakened one too." In addition to being envious, I can't help but feel a little lonely. If she is an awakened person, even if she is the most basic F level, she can still be qualified to enter and act together at this time, instead of doing the guard work that is better than nothing in the outermost places. Unfortunately, there is no if. "Let's go, we should go find a place with a good view," she said to Chin Mo. Hearing this, Chin Mo nodded, he had no objection. He followed Su Yin and walked close to the wall. At the same time, he quietly opened his holographic vision, and his hearing covered the entire pharmaceutical factory and its surroundings. Although the current holographic field of vision has expanded to a kilometer, the scope of the pharmaceutical factory is too wide, and Qin Mo cannot cover it all. He can only rely on his hearing to detect places that cannot be covered. However, even so, all the movements in the arena have entered his mind, and the super brain will analyze and process them. A total of 328 people, of which there are 246 awakened people. Hiss. This number is to exclude people from the Security Bureau. That is to say, Tiandaway actually arranged more than 200 awakened people in this small pharmaceutical factory, which is twice as many as the Security Bureau. Even if this is not an ambush, then the Security Bureau has greatly underestimated the strength of the Tiandaway. On paper alone, Tiandaway is clearly superior. This time, it's not good. Qin Mo frowned slowly, and narrowed his eyes slightly. At this time, on the tallest building in the pharmaceutical factory, the kind-faced old man and number 2 of the Tiandaway were standing on the top. The old man folded his hands behind his back and stared into the distance. Wisps of murderous aura gradually emanated from his body, getting stronger and stronger. The big fish has taken the bait, Shi Shui, let's do it. When the voice fell to the ground, the middle-aged man said in a deep voice, yes. Then, he took out a remote control and pressed the middle button without hesitation. Boom, boom, boom. A loud bang suddenly sounded from every corner of the pharmaceutical factory, like the most gorgeous death movement. Dynamite. It's countless explosives. Tiandaway actually buried a large amount of high explosives silently under the pharmaceutical factory. When a series of loud noises resounded in their ears, the people in the security office immediately knew that they were in an ambush. Everything before was all illusions, just bait, for this moment. Of course, this cannot be blamed on the lack of vigilance of the Li family in Qingyang, it is because the Heaven and Earth Society has spent a lot of money for today. The inner ghost that Li Chengqing found out, as well as the memories he read, are all unquestionable, but these are sent out by Heaven and Earth on purpose. They abandoned the peripheral forces, lost hundreds of awakened ones, cut off their own wings, and adopted the most ruthless sacrifice tactics. Only in this way can Qingyang Li's doubts be truly dispelled, and they will be allowed to step into this invisible net. The music of death was still playing, and many deep pits appeared on the ground, and splashes mixed with earth, stone and steel attacked the people in the security department in all directions and without dead ends. Explosives will not harm high-level awakened people, but for low-level awakened people, that's different. For the 3 levels of awakened, D, E, and F, their strengthened parts have not yet integrated into the whole body. As long as they are blown to weak points, such as the head, they will be severely injured. If you are unlucky, you may even die on the spot. But judging from the current amount of explosives, it is impossible to escape. Therefore, during the few seconds when the movement was played, dozens of people fell to the ground, bleeding from their bodies. Hidden, find a place to hide first. Li Yuan shouted loudly. Her fair face was now covered with black ashes, and there was a piece of scorched earth in front of her eyes. The house collapsed, and the ground was full of dirt and rocks. The smoke and dust was extremely choking, blurring her vision, and the explosion just now made her still have slight tinnitus. Her current situation is very bad. Cough, cough, cough. Li Yuan coughed and waved his arms, urging the wind element to sweep in front of him and blow away the smoke. She quickly looked around, and immediately saw several team members collapsed on the ground, as if in a coma, and the rest of them were also disheveled. Don't mess around, hide nearby, stay alert, and beware of the enemy. Li Yuan yelled. She walked quickly to the side of the unconscious Wang Yan, tested her breath, and confirmed that she was still alive. Afterwards, Li Yuan pulled her behind a low wall, and Li Chengfeng and others gathered beside her. Team leader, what should we do now? Li Chengfeng asked hurriedly. Find an opportunity to withdraw first and then talk. Li Yuan said coldly. She scanned the surroundings back and forth, trying to identify the direction of retreat. However, at this moment, a loud shout sounded in his ears. Kill, kill, kill. The members of the Tiandaway, who were hiding in a safe place just now, chose to fight out at this time, which is undoubtedly a disaster for Li Yuan and the others. Now they are all disabled, but the other party is in full condition. It can be said that it is clear at a glance which one is stronger and which one is weaker. Not to mention, they are at a disadvantage in terms of numbers. The current situation is very bad. Seeing more than 20 people rushing towards him not far away, including a B-level awakened person, Li Yuan slowly clenched his fists, his gaze gradually became firmer. Now that things have happened, I can't run away. Only, fight to the death. At the top, number 2 is condescending, looking at the ruins below, the corners of his mouth are slowly raised. He straightened his arms, let go of the remote control, and let it do a free fall, falling to the ground far away. It's time for me to kill the fish, and I'll leave it to you here. Number 2 said with a smile. The old man nodded slowly, waved his hands, and said lightly, "Go, Shishui, and enjoy this graceful dance music. This will be the first step for us to realize our grand plan." Scholar obeys orders. Number 2 leaned over gracefully, then got up and took a step back, stepping into the air. The next moment, he fell straight down. Tang! Flames suddenly rose up and filled his whole body in an instant. He opened his arms, and fiery red wings gradually emerged. Whisper! Fengming Judian, a crimson Suzaku suddenly appeared in the air, and swooped down towards Li Mo below. Li Mo's face changed suddenly, he sensed a strong danger. Before he could make a move, Li Yi, who was following beside him, took the lead to take a step forward and stood in front of him, his eyes gradually sharpened. His body began to change, his aura gradually rose, and his expression was unprecedentedly dignified. Although the two sides are at the same level, Li Yi is not sure in his heart. The person who swooped in is the strongest A-level he has ever encountered. The melee was on the verge of breaking out, as if hundreds of the most bizarre blood flowers would bloom in the next moment. However, at this moment, the mighty Longwei descended from the sky. For a moment, everyone in the pharmaceutical factory, whether it was the Tiandaway or the Security Bureau, froze in unison, as if they were being watched by some ancient creature. A high-pitched dragon chant resounded between heaven and earth, shaking people's hearts. A ray of white light streaked across the sky. Like a cannonball, it slammed into the pharmaceutical factory. The light faded, revealing Li Mo's figure. He stood with his hands behind his back, his pupils had turned a noble golden color, and his whole body was as majestic as water, which belonged to his domain. Li Mo is here. An S-level awakened person is fully capable of killing everyone present, and it is extremely easy. This is overwhelming combat power, this is the so-called, the gap between heaven and earth. Logically speaking, at this time, the situation should have taken a turn for the worse, and it was the turn of the Tiandaway people to fall into despair. However, under the pressure of Longwei, they didn't panic at all, and continued to kill everyone in the security office as before, as if they didn't worry about Li Mo at all. Since there are no scruples, then there must be something to rely on. And the ability to resist an S-rank awakener is obviously another S-rank. With the bleak breeze, the chilling breath floated in every corner of the battlefield, and the sharp murderous aura seemed to turn into a sharp knife to cut everyone's throats. Li Mo slowly raised his head and looked up at the kind old man standing above. The golden light in his pupils became stronger and stronger, and at the same time his face became colder and colder. Li Mo didn't expect that the Tiandaway would have an S-level awakener as a backup, but after thinking about it, if it wasn't the case, how dare he make such a plan against the Qingyong Li family? Ah, interesting. The phantom of a giant dragon suddenly appeared behind him. Immediately afterwards, Li Mo disappeared in place in an instant, appeared in front of the old man, and punched out. Roar! The roar resounded through the sky. A huge phantom of a white tiger covered the old man, and the strong murderous aura almost condensed into substance. The old man also raised his arm, stretched out his fist, and collided heavily with Li Mo. He sneered and stared at Li Mo without taking half a step back. Obviously, from this blow, it can be seen that the strength of the two sides is comparable. Both of them are S-rank, and both of them are awakeners of the mimic system. The majestic dragon's majesty with its chilling breath, the eye-catching white tiger against the five-clawed golden dragon, whoever wins. Still unknown. But this is definitely not good news for everyone in the security office. The top combat power of both sides is already on par, and the other levels of combat power, the security department can be said to be at a disadvantage in an all-round way. The situation on the battlefield has not changed because of Li Mo's arrival, Li Yuan and others are still in danger. The current situation is extremely ugly. For the current plan, there must be a breaker. The flames of war have already ignited in the pharmaceutical factory, and fighting has begun. At this time, the outside of the pharmaceutical factory is different. Su Yin hugged Chen Mo tightly and protected him in her arms. The two of them pressed against the wall without any movement. The moment the dynamite rang, the military academy graduate reacted quickly. Su Yin doesn't know what's going on inside, but she can't help but say that the strong smell of gunpowder and smoke rushing into her nostrils is definitely not a good sign. But as ordinary people, what is the use of them at this time? Su Yin felt extremely bitter in her heart. Ahem, Sister Su, let me go first, it's too boring. Chen Mo's voice suddenly sounded. Hearing this, Su Yin let go of her arm, and said to him in a low voice, the situation is unknown now, in order to ensure safety, we'd better stay here and stay vigilant. What Sister Su said makes sense, but Chen Mo spread his hands, and said helplessly, the team leader and the Tiandaway have already engaged in fire, and the situation is not optimistic. Sister Su, it is too dangerous for you to stay here now. It is better to retreat outside. Hearing this, Su Yin couldn't help being taken aback. She looked at Chen Mo suspiciously and asked, how do you know? It does not matter. Chen Mo shook his head, stood up and patted the dust off his body, then picked up Su Yin, smiled and said, anyway, I'll send Sister Su to a safe place first. The voice fell, and the two suddenly disappeared in place. In the blink of an eye, Chen Mo appeared 3 miles away with Su Yin in his arms, and then put her on the ground. Everyone in Su Yin was dumbfounded. She didn't realize what happened just now at all. Chen Mo's speed was too fast, so fast that the doubts in her heart were not over yet. Unexpectedly, in the blink of an eye, the scene in front of him has been turned upside down. What the hell is this? Su Yin was stunned. She looked at Chen Mo in a daze, opened her mouth, wanted to say something but couldn't say anything. Chen Mo, you. What does Sister Su want to know? Wait for me to come back first, I still have some things to do now. Sister Su, just stand here and don't move around. Chen Mo smiled and stretched out his hand to smooth out the folds of her collar. Then, under Su Yin's gaze, he suddenly disappeared again, leaving behind only a slight breeze. Su Yin opened her mouth wide, her eyes were wide open, it was hard to believe what she just saw. Chen Mo, he seems to be an awakened person. She murmured. Boom, a beam of practicing saber light ruthlessly hit Li Yuan in front of him, making a loud noise. The violent shock hit her body through the barrier, shaking her internal organs. Puff, Li Yuan spat out a mouthful of blood, but her eyes were still determined. The anklet she was wearing on her ankle had disappeared, and turned into a light golden mask, blocking her body. It's just that this mask is already full of cracks. This is a life-saving item given to her by the Li family in Qingyang. It is an elemental crystal precipitated by an A-level awakener who has controlled the gold element. At this time, facing the high-level awakened ones of the Tiandaway, she used this thing without hesitation. And Li Yuan didn't just protect herself, she directly activated the elemental crystals to include all the people in the 7 groups. And it is precisely because of this that the protective effect of the elemental crystals will be reduced. The opponent is only a B-level awakened person, but the attack can penetrate it. If this continues, this elemental crystal will shatter within a few seconds, and they will all die by then. The breath of despair permeated everyone's heart. Li Yuan clenched her fists tightly and stared at the people of Tiandaway who were getting closer to her. She had just experienced this kind of script a few days ago. It was also a Tiandaway, and it was also a life and death crisis. However, the last time at the critical moment of life and death, someone stood in front of her and saved her. But this time, he could no longer place his hopes on others. Li Mo is fighting, Li Yi is also fighting, even the goal she has been chasing, her father Li Mo, a powerful S-level awakener, is also fighting. So, who can come to save her? Li Yuan could only choose to save himself. Get ready to fight to the death. Li Yuan bit her lip and shouted in a deep voice. Hearing this, Li Changfeng still has a few members of the 7th group who are still able to move, and they all said in unison, yes. As soon as the words fell to the ground, another saber light flashed in front of the eyes of several people. This knife was also mixed with the attacks of other awakened people, and it crossed a very short distance in an instant, and it was about to fall on the golden mask. A whirlwind appeared in Li Yuan's palm, and she even raised her arm. However, just when the knife light was about to hit the mask, Li Yuan's eyes suddenly went dark. A tall figure suddenly broke into her sight, just like last time, blocking her like an indestructible iron tower. Still the same script. It's just that she didn't fall into a coma this time, but actually saw the person in front of her. Li Yuan is very familiar with this back view. This knife cut on Qin Mo's steel body, as if it was tickling, and he didn't feel anything at all. The B-level awakened person from the Tiandaway looked at Qin Mo in the smoke and dust vigilantly, with a suspicious expression on his face. He didn't even know when this person appeared. Suddenly, the person in front of him disappeared from his sight. Immediately afterwards, a faint voice sounded from the back of his head without warning. "Goodbye." Qin Mo raised his hand and pinched the back of his neck. With a little force, there was a corpse of a high-level awakened person on the ground. At this moment, the surrounding time seemed to stand still. Whether it's the Tiandaway or the Security Bureau, their expressions are all frozen on their faces, watching everything that happened in front of them in disbelief. Afterwards, everyone felt a blur in front of their eyes, and Qin Mo disappeared from sight again, like a ghost. The corpses fell to the ground almost in no particular order, gradually losing their original temperature. The flashing expressions of their pupils were surprisingly consistent, a mix of horror and bewilderment, shock and bewilderment intertwined. And equally shocked, there were several people from Group 7. Li Yuan looked at Qin Mo with a faint smile on the corner of his mouth, and his whole body froze in place, even forgetting to put away the elemental crystals that were about to shatter first. Qin Mo. He is Qin Mo. He turned out to be Qin Mo. The huge amount of information hit her mind like a tide, and now Li Yuan was like a solitary boat floating in the sea, feeling overwhelmed at the bottom of her heart. A high-level awakened person died in Qin Mo's hands so effortlessly. So, what strength is he? Grade A, or is it stronger? But isn't Qin Mo an ordinary person whose genes have not been awakened? How is he now? For the first time, Li Yuan felt that his team members were so strange and mysterious. She thought she knew Qin Mo very well, but his appearance at this moment shattered all her previous cognition. Moreover, it's not just her, the whole 7 groups are like this. The expressions on the faces of Li Changfeng and the others are wonderful. But Qin Mo doesn't bother to appreciate it now, he has other things to do. "Leader, I'll take a step first." Qin Mo waved his hand at her and said with a smile. Immediately afterwards, he exploded with speed and disappeared before everyone's eyes. Only Li Yuan, Li Changfeng, and the corpses were left, looking at each other. Even though there are tens of thousands of doubts in his heart, now is not the time to answer them. Li Yuan took a deep breath, forced his mind down, and said in a deep voice. "Leave one person to take care of the wounded, and the others follow me to support." After solving the troubles on Li Yuan's side, Qin Mo hurried towards Li Mo's side. The pharmaceutical factory is such a small place, although his holographic vision can't cover the whole area, but he only needs a second to go from one end to the other. After a short while, a red Suzaku and a rebellious goshawk came into his eyes. Goshawk is Li Yi, but his current condition is very bad. There are many places on his huge body that are scorched black, and a small half of his sharp feathers have been burned off. Obviously, number 2 has the overall upper hand. He is also an A-level awakener, and his strength is far better than Li Yi. If this continues, in less than a minute, Li Yi will undoubtedly lose. Qin Mo's super brain analyzed the battle situation in front of him clearly in just a moment. Immediately afterwards, he jumped up, showing amazing explosive power. The person was more than 30 meters in the air, and he had already raised his arms backwards, and his fist was aimed at Suzaku's head. Number 2 naturally found the unexpected guest, and Qin Mo's reflection flashed in his pupils. Immediately afterwards, the reflection zoomed in rapidly. He didn't even have time to react in any way. Boom! The next moment, Qin Mo's fist pierced through the blazing flames and hit his skull hard. The huge force did not penetrate the hard defense on his body surface, but directly tore the defense to pieces more simply and rudely. Click and wipe. A series of fine cracks are like spider webs, starting from his skull, and spreading rapidly towards the whole body. A mournful cry suddenly sounded in midair, and number 2 was like a mutilated shell, which fell heavily on the ground with an unparalleled attitude of decay, smashing out a deep hole. At the same time, his breath of life slipped rapidly, and his consciousness faded. Tiandi Wei number 2 died. This is a spike, an undisputed spike. Li Mo was shocked, he just blinked his eyes, he didn't expect a powerful A-level awakener to die just like that. The oppressive feeling brought by Suzaku disappeared, and everyone on the surrounding battlefield raised their heads to stare at the figure suspended in midair. Li Yi's eagle eyes were as wide as a copper bell, and with his capture speed, he didn't even see clearly how Qin Mo shot. What kind of terrifying speed is this? What kind of amazing strength is this? Suddenly an uninvited guest broke into the battlefield. As soon as he appeared, he broke the so-called overwhelming situation and reversed it straight away. Moreover, no one knew this person. To Li Mo and Li Yi, Qin Mo was a completely unfamiliar face. No one would remember an ordinary team member in the 7th group of the Security Department of the Security Bureau, even if he went in and out of the Security Bureau every day, even if he had met and even talked to Li Mo a month ago. The status of ordinary people is clearly revealed at this moment. No one cares. Li Mo and the others would only think that Qin Mo was the mysterious high-level awakener of the Li family in Qingyang and Li Mo's hidden backhand all along. Time goes backwards. Above the sky, the white tiger and the golden dragon are colliding in the field. The two sides will fight countless times in an instant, but they have been deadlocked, and neither can gain the upper hand. However, the mentality of the two is completely different. The old man was extremely relaxed and unhurried, but Li Mo was constantly looking for opportunities to defeat him in one fell swoop. Compared with the two, he was even more anxious. And this is something that can't be helped. Every second of stalemate, the Security Bureau will kill or injure one more person. The longer the time dragged on, the worse the situation became for them. However, the strength of the two is comparable, so how can it be possible to decide the winner in a short period of time? The dragon prestige pervading around Li Mo's body became more solemn, and his attacks became more severe. Seeing his appearance like this, the old man couldn't help but secretly sneered. He could see that Li Mo's heart was getting anxious. The enemy is now, once the state of mind is out of balance, the flaws will definitely be exposed. As for what the old man has to do now, it is to seize this flaw and tear it apart continuously, causing an absolutely fatal blow. It just so happened that he had prepared a backhand for this, and he would definitely give Li Mo a big surprise. I saw him suddenly let out a sharp roar. The majesty of the white tiger was overwhelming. The old man's body began to change, the clothes on his body were cracked, and the strong golden and iron aura filled the surroundings, and his body gradually became huge. The phantom of the eye-catching white tiger seemed to merge with him. Obviously, he started to use his real strength. Li Mo's pupils shrank, and the majestic dragon power gradually retracted, and his arm also changed, faintly resembling a dragon's claw. Boom! When the two sides are driving force, they are still colliding. But at this moment, a faint figure suddenly stepped into the battle against the tyrannical pressure of the two. The person who came was none other than Li Tongshan, who took the S-level elemental crystal from the Security Bureau and came belatedly. The moment he appeared, he activated his genetic power, and his entire body turned into a bright silver light. Secretary Li is a top A-level element awakener, and the element he controls is light. From the moment the light appeared, it rushed towards the two people who were fighting, like a suicide attack, but at an extremely fast speed. Li Mo immediately sensed that someone was coming towards him, and when he found out that it was Li Tongshan, doubts and surprises arose in his heart at the same time. Why did he rush up here? However, Li Mo didn't have time to think about it. The old man's attack was still in front of him, so he had no flaws to react, and could only move his body subconsciously. He stood in front of Li Tongshan to prevent him from being torn into pieces by the S-rank's tyrannical force. However, when Li Mo made such subtle movements, he didn't notice the old man in front of him with a strange look in his pupils. Boom! The bright silver light crossed Li Mo's body directly, and a bloody light suddenly appeared between the sky and the earth. The light scattered, revealing Li Tongshan's figure. At this time, his face was full of smiles. It's just this smile that looks so dazzling. Li Mo looked extremely stunned. He lowered his head and looked at his body, only to see an ice pick with a blue pattern engraved on it near his heart on the left side of his lower abdomen. He recognized the origin of this ice pick at a glance. The eerie blue pattern exuded a strange gleam, and the strong cold continuously invaded his body along his wound. Each ray of such cold air is enough to kill an A-level awakened person. Li Mo was shocked. He never thought that Li Tongshan would attack him. But when his mind turned, he immediately figured out the context of the matter. It doesn't take any brains at all, the truth is right in front of my eyes. Li Tongshan is the number 3 of the Tiandawei. He is the high-level undercover agent who has been hiding in the Li family in Qingyang. He directly connects with No. 2. The only people who know his true identity are number 2 and No. 1. I have been dormant for several years, and all I have done is this moment. This time, they not only wanted to kill the next generation heir of the Li family in Qingyang, but also directly kill the current patriarch of the Li family. Li Tongshan had a strong smile on his face. He bent down gracefully, put his right hand on his left chest, and performed a very standard ancient aristocratic etiquette. Patriarch, please go. He said so, it would be his honor to witness an S-rank awakener fall before his eyes. Hearing his words, Li Mo frowned, his eyes were extremely cold, and his face was extremely ugly. He stretched out his hand to hold the ice pick at his waist, and the dragon claws exploded with power, and there was a crisp sound in the air, and pieces of ice crystals fell towards the ground like snowflakes. It's just a single elemental crystal, and it's naturally impossible to kill him, even if it's an S-level crystallization, it's the same. How can the dead compare with the living? However, this ice pick can break into his domain and break his demigod body. Once the demigod's body is broken, he will definitely fall into a complete disadvantage in the battle with the old man. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and the old man couldn't continue to maintain his previous stability, so he couldn't help but get excited. Ha ha ha, Li Mo, did you ever like this meeting gift that this old man gave you? As soon as the words fell, he shot out, and the tiger's claws tore out hundreds of times at him in an instant, and the mighty dragon's might immediately became shattered. Immediately afterwards, the old man turned around and swung his tail, the white tiger roared, and the murderous aura accompanied by tyrannical force fell on Li Mo's body. Puff! Blood sprayed in the air again, and Li Mo was severely injured by this blow. The overflowing murderous aura rampaged through his body, strangling his internal organs. Li Mo wanted to use Longwei to fight, but the demigod's body was broken, which affected him too much. He fell rapidly from a high altitude, and was directly driven into the ruins below by the old man, creating a cloud of smoke and dust. The old man stared at him condescendingly, his eyes were strange and his expression was ferocious. At the same time, Qin Mo had just killed number 2 of the Tiandawei in an instant. He was suspended in the air, directly ignoring the shock on Li Mo's and the others' faces. He didn't pay attention to them at all, but frowned on his own. He seemed to have heard a name that should never appear here just now. Li Mo, brother Li. Qin Mo's throat rolled, and his holographic vision was just able to cover the S-level battle situation, but it did not send back information about Li Mo. However, after this encounter, he already found that he could not perceive the S-level awakened ones. Qin Mo already understood the true meaning of that sentence. The body of a demigod, the avenue is natural. Is it possible? Qin Mo's eyes changed, he turned around in the air, and an amazing bounce appeared on the roof of a building 500 meters away. Afterwards, he fully expanded his perspective, penetrated more than a dozen layers of obstacles almost instantly, and looked at the place where the voice came out just now. I saw a huge deep pit appearing in the ruins, and suddenly a bloody dragon claw stretched out and grabbed the edge of the ruins. Immediately afterwards, a disheveled head gradually appeared in front of Qin Mo's eyes. At this moment, Qin Mo's pupils shrank sharply, and he blurted out. Hold the grass. Because of Longhua, Li Mo's appearance is different from before, but how can Qin Mo fail to see that this guy is the Li Mo he knows? Qin Mo was stunned. He really didn't expect this to happen. That Li Mo who was drinking beer with him at the barbecue stand turned out to be the current patriarch of the Li family in Qingyang, the director of the security bureau, Li Guogong from Dakan, and an S-level awakener. That guy is actually the immediate boss of his immediate boss. Qin Mo was completely dumbfounded. He murmured, how could it be you? But the next moment, Chin Mo put away his shock, and his face became serious. If he is not mistaken, Li Mo's current situation is very bad. Chin Mo's eyes moved slightly, his eyes flickered, and he immediately spotted another S-rank who was fighting with him. The white tiger descended from the sky, its scarlet eyes were full of devouring cruelty, and the corner of its grinning mouth was an extremely happy smile. Take advantage of his illness and kill him. At this time, he must use all his strength to kill Li Mo first. Not good. Brother Li is in danger. Chin Mo thought inwardly, his brows furrowed, and two small red dots suddenly appeared in his pupils. In this case, what else does he care about? Let's save Li Mo first. Red dots quickly filled Chin Mo's eyes, and then, two terrifying high-temperature rays shot out across a long distance in an instant. Boom! All obstacles along the way were melted under the terrifying high temperature. The old man's heart skipped a beat, and he felt a strong sense of danger. But just as the thought flashed in his heart, a dazzling red light suddenly appeared in his line of sight, and the air was burned. What is this stuff? The old man turned into a white tiger was startled immediately, and he subconsciously wanted to dodge first, but he was in a falling state, and the high-temperature rays were traveling too fast, so it was too late. The next moment, there was a mournful howling sound between heaven and earth. Boom! The white tiger fell heavily to the ground, and its huge body was dragged more than 10 meters away before barely stopping the momentum. Where does he still have the high-spiritedness of just now? A scorched black appeared in the middle of the back, and there was still a faint smell of meat permeating the air. Obviously, the high-temperature rays that Chin Mo shot with all his strength caused great damage to the old man, but it did not break his demigod body. Just a little bit, just a little bit. The white tiger looked at the direction where the high-temperature rays appeared in surprise, and got up from the ground vigorously with all four limbs, with a chilling aura permeating his whole body, maintaining full vigilance. He had no idea what was going on. Could it be that Li Mo also dispatched another S-rank from Qingyang County? But he has never heard of Qingyang Li's S-level fire awakener. The old man was startled. Not only him, everyone in the pharmaceutical factory was shocked. That high-temperature ray exuding a strong destructive aura shone between the sky and the earth, attracting all eyes, causing the battlefield to stagnate. It was so shocking. If you hadn't seen it with your own eyes, it would be hard to imagine all this. Li Tongshan's eyes widened, and his body froze in place. There was no ancient etiquette for nobles. In the last second, he thought that the overall situation was settled, and today it was considered stable. But who would have thought that a master would emerge out of nowhere? Seeing number one's solemn reaction, Li Tongshan had some guesses in his heart. It won't be another S-rank. His throat rolled, he swallowed slowly, and turned his head to look in Chin Mo's direction. But who would have thought that he would see the dazzling crimson light again? Chi. Chin Mo shot another high-temperature ray, which instantly melted Li Tongshan's heart. The indescribable horror was forever frozen on his face. While obliterating this A-level casually, Chin Mo had already exploded with extreme speed and arrived at the very center of the battle in an instant. He faced the white tiger, his back to Li Mo, and stood between them. Chin Mo's expression returned to calm. He looked at the S-rank white tiger with a height of more than 10 feet. After a moment of silence, a smile suddenly appeared on his face, and he murmured softly. I thought, how strong is the S-rank? When the words fell to the ground, red dots appeared in the center of his pupils again. At the same time, he opened his 5 fingers and slowly clenched them into fists. Every cell in his body began to become active. Facing the murderous aura emanating from the old man, Chin Mo didn't feel it and was not affected at all. Li Mo, who was behind him, looked at him with a face full of astonishment, and his heart was already full of turmoil. Then, Chin Mo suddenly disappeared. When he reappeared, he had arrived behind the white tiger like a ghost. Chin Mo raised his right fist, his eyes were red. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.